Randonautica is an app that uses a random number generator and location settings to create coordinates for users to explore in their local areas. The app was released in February 2020 and became especially popular during the COVID lockdowns. People would often document their findings through video and post them online. Sometimes people find downright creepy things or places, or even find themselves at the scene of a crime. A viewer named David sent me this first story and footage. It was August of 2020. The weather had been good, and so he and a friend decided to use Randonautica out of boredom. They generated 4 anomalies in total, since the first 3 were in someone's backyard or inaccessible locations. In the app, anomalies are points that can be either attractors or voids. Attractors are clusters of random points that are very dense, while voids are clusters with a very low density. The 4th anomaly looked promising, and so the 2 friends drove there. You can see on the screen the street they drove down, followed by the small path they went down after parking. The anomaly had a radius of 470 meters, so it was a fairly big area, but they didn't have to look around for long before making a bizarre and honestly creepy discovery. This is a photograph of the path they walked down, and as they walked down, they stumbled across a note stuck through a stick. On the outside of it, it read, "Write down your cell phone number." When folded open, it read, "I can give you a cell phone number or even an email address. Give me your mail address and I will send you it," with what it is referring to remaining unclear.
So you can see, first of all, it says, write down your cell phone number. When you fold it open, ich kann dir eine Handynummer geben oder sogar eine E-Mail-Adresse. Gib mir eine Mailadresse und ich sende es dir. So it says somewhere along the lines, I can give you a cell phone number or even an email address. Give me an email address and I'll send it to you. So yeah, that was just hanging on this tree here, on this branch, this piece of paper. I'm gonna put it back.
He ended up writing his number on the note and putting it back on the stick. Right next to the note were a bunch of bras lined up on a fallen tree branch with no explanation.
So, yeah, that's a bunch of bras. In total, 1, 2, 3, 4, behind there, 5, 6. There are more.
These items couldn't have been left there for more than a few days, as they were discovered on the 6th of August, and the last rainfall was 3 days earlier, yet the piece of paper showed no signs of ever having gotten wet. Among some of the other things that the friends found at the scene were 2 packages of condoms and a pot that was seemingly used for a fire. The friends returned the next day on the 7th, and the note where he wrote down his number was gone. A few days later, he got a text from an unknown number just saying hi. He answered saying, "Hi, who is this?" The number then replied his address, and at this point he blocked the number. Whatever or whoever this little scene was meant for remains a mystery. This following footage, posted online by Taylor Vasquez, documents her disturbing findings when also using Randonautica. She downloaded the app and generated a location not far from her house. The location turns out to be an abandoned creek-looking area.
So I keep seeing that Randonaut thing all over TikTok and I really want to try it out. So I just downloaded the app and I found a location that's like 1.5 miles by my house. So I'm gonna go check it out and see if I can see.
Nothing seems out of the ordinary at first, and it seems like a typical random location the app could lead somebody to, until she finds a series of disturbing drawings, seemingly done by a child.
Pretty creepy. I'll go see what that is. Okay, so I just opened up one of the photos and it's whatever the fuck that is. Then we have these random 3. This one's a "It's Your Birthday" with the snowman with, I don't know. And these 2 I just put together. It's like, play with me. Alright, I think it was just my imagination. I think I'm just hearing shit.
As she's analyzing the drawings, she suddenly hears an unsettling sound.
Play with me.
It sounds like the voice of a young child, but the video cuts here. On a later date, Taylor returns to the creek, but this time there are new drawings that weren't there last time. According to her, these ones being even creepier than the previous series of drawings, with one of the drawings being a sigil of Baphomet. As she's distracted by the drawings, the voice of a child can once again be heard in the background.
If they have messages on them, because then Like, those look like symbols.
At first, she doesn't seem to hear it, but once she does, she makes a dash for it and the video cuts.
I don't really see anything else.
After uploading the video to TikTok, a viewer pointed out what appears to be the face of a young child peering from behind a tree.
No one was with me, and tell me if you guys think that looks like a ghost child, because I don't know.
Taylor uploads another video analyzing a journal she picked up from the creek, with each page revealing another unsettling message. Taylor returns to the creek one last time and finds not only a Ouija board made out of a piece of cardboard, but also a large knife sitting next to it. This was the last time Taylor dared to return to the creek, and so whatever was going on here will remain a mystery. As with many things posted on the internet, there's no 100% proof that this whole series of videos weren't staged. However, there were certain aspects of the videos that viewers feel make them feel more realistic, mainly the weathered-looking pieces of paper that contain the drawings, along with the disturbing image of the child's face in the video. Whether or not this was genuine is really up to the viewer to decide. This story was sent by viewer Davey S. One night as she was scrolling through TikTok, she came across a story about a few teenagers who were using Randonautica, and after following the set of coordinates they were given, reached a secluded beach area where they saw a suitcase washed up that contained something disturbing. But I'll talk more about that in a bit. Davey and her roommate Ash saw this and were determined to make their own unsettling discovery on the app. They invited 2 other friends to join them, and when they all got together, they gathered in Davey's room and figured out how to use the app. They set a radius around their current location, 29 kilometers, or around 18 to 19 miles. After hitting the button to get the location, a screen popped up telling them to set their intentions for what they want to learn and experience during the outing. The word they inputted was spooky. The location the app gave was eerily close to her house. Davey and her friends live in a rural part of Alabama on Lookout Mountain, and at the bottom of the mountain is an abandoned steel plant among a few other abandoned buildings in a lower income neighborhood. The location it gave the group of friends was 3 streets away from them. The location was on a very long road that led on for miles and miles without any other intersecting streets. The friends gathered into Davey's car with her friend Misa in the passenger seat and her friends Ash and Beck sitting in the back seat. It didn't take long for the girls to get to the street, and as Davey was about to turn left, she looked at the street sign Owl's Hollow Road. Davey's friends went from loud and excited to instantly quiet as she said, "We're here." Davey continued driving down this dark road surrounded by trees and no street lamps. It was pitch black and around 1 a.m., so the group was definitely feeling the creepiness factor kicking in. As they approached the destination, Davey pulled to the side of the road. At this point, all 3 of Davey's friends were becoming apprehensive about the whole thing, as they saw a very dark trail that led into the woods. The 4 friends sat in the car for a few minutes and laughed nervously about whether they should go through with this or not, but they all felt uneasy. The group started to agree that it felt like they were being watched. Despite being in a locked car, they felt vulnerable being alone with just a dying phone and a switchblade, so they all agreed to leave, and they pulled off further down the road. They kept driving, exploring this narrow road, and there was nothing but trees and the occasional street lamp. Davey was getting tired and decided to just do a 3-point turn on the very narrow road and go back home. There was a sense of relief, until the group realized they had to pass the trail again. As they passed it, Davey looked in her rearview mirror and saw what seemed to be a hooded male figure standing in front of the trail. She pressed the gas even harder, but she didn't tell her friends what she saw because she didn't want to scare them. The friends briefly talked about that night before going to sleep around 2 a.m. The next morning, Beck went home and Davey took Ash to work. Misa decided to hang out with Davey for a little longer before she had to be home in a few hours. They discussed going back to the trail since it was daylight and they felt a bit more comfortable. They made their way back to the trail and got out of the car, this time with keys and phone in one hand and pocket knife in the other. As they walked up the trail, they realized it led uphill, something they didn't notice the night before because it was so dark. They started to feel like something was off, like they were being watched again. They made it to the top of the trail, which led to a clearing, almost like a dump site as she described it. There were tires, fast food garbage, household items, etc. The 2 started looking around some more and came across a bunch of mattresses scattered throughout the clearing. The disturbing part was the mattresses were made beds, Pillows, blankets, sheets, all that you'd expect on a made bed. The sight was so unsettling that the two friends agreed to leave. They hurried back downhill towards the car, and about halfway, Misa stopped in front of Davy and pointed into the woods and said, "What is that?" as she spotted a red cooler in a small ditch, something they hadn't seen on the way uphill. They stepped down into the ditch to examine it, and as they walked over to it, all the two friends could smell was the stench of something rotting. Upon looking around the surrounding area, she spotted a dead cat carcass lying a few meters away. Avoiding getting too close to the dead carcass, she grabbed a big stick and tilted the cooler upright, which had a bit of weight to it, making it difficult. Something could be heard sloshing around inside of it like it was full of ice. She shoved the stick into the top of it and opened it slightly, and when it opened, a gust of hot, moist, putrid air hit Davy in the face. Bugs and maggots immediately started coming out of the cooler, along with a horrid smell of decaying overpowering the smell of the cat. Upon opening it a little more, what she saw was a wad of wet, matted black hair. Davy ran back to Misa and yelled to get in the car. The two sped down the road as Misa frantically asked Davy what was in the cooler, but she couldn't open her mouth in fear of puking. After driving a little ways up the road, hoping to find a driveway to assist in turning around, Davy eventually gave up and did another really tight three-point turn on the narrow road, but the two would have to pass the trail one more time. As they did, Davy noticed some pieces of wood in the road that had not been there before. She looked around and saw the same hooded male figure from the night before, standing in the woods. She drove her car over the pieces of wood, damaging the bottom of her front bumper, and then sped off back home. She and her friend returned to the trail one more time since this incident to record the trail, which was the footage you've been seeing. Davy has deleted the Randonautica app and not used it since. Earlier I had mentioned that there was a video that inspired Davy and her friends to try the app themselves. That video was filmed by a couple TikTok users, who each posted their own angles of the video.
Guys, we found a suitcase at the...
Gabby, go. I'll hold your stuff. I don't know.
Bro. Oh, wait, open it. Open it. It stinks, y'all.
It washed up. It's
Oh! Oh! Okay, so she's calling the police so we can see if it's actually a dead body or it's just food.
What do I found a suitcase on the water in Alpine Beach. And
Yeah, here's the crime scene.
so we just found this suitcase and we're gonna get it. Okay, so they're like opening it up with the sticks because we don't want to. Yes, there's a bag. There's a bag, like a black bag in there.
The Randonautica app generated a location that led them to a rocky breakwall below a jetty at the shore of Alki Beach in West Seattle, when they found a mysterious black suitcase washed up on a bunch of rocks under the bridge. As they approached the suitcase, they realized there was a foul odor emitting from the suitcase, and the contents of the suitcase may be more disturbing than they had initially thought. The teens called the police, but with Seattle police response times being notoriously slow, the police took 3 to 4 hours to show up, and by that time, the tide had risen enough to where the suitcase had washed away. It took a scuba team to retrieve the suitcase and its contents. The contents were indeed quite disturbing. The remains of a couple, Jessica Lewis, who was 35, and Austin Wenner, who was 27, were found inside of the black garbage bag inside the suitcase. Their murderer was their landlord, Michael Dudley, who the pair had previously argued with regarding their rent payments. It was reported by neighbors that on the night of the pair's murder, a male voice could be heard screaming, "Please don't do this, just let me leave," before gunshots were fired, and this was reportedly 10 days before the suitcase was found. The videos had eventually been taken down by the teens. With so many people using an app that's designed to send you to randomly generated places, it's inevitable that sometimes people are going to run into some horrific things that they were not supposed to find. So if you do use the app or anything like it, it's best to just stay alert to your surroundings. This was an eye-catching post made in 2014, though it was eye-catching for the wrong reason. The advertiser states that he's seeking an unpaid young houseboy that will care for him, but he had to note that he meant in a non-sexual way. He also notes that he's a 55-year-old male who lives alone with his cat, but even if that isn't slightly concerning considering he's seeking younger males to live with him, he claims to have had 3 houseboys before. This could leave one to wonder whatever became of them. The lighting, angle, and just about everything else regarding this man's picture mirrors something straight out of a serial killer playbook. These kinds of ads are the very likely ones to be leading to something far worse than would appear on the surface. This was the listing for a bed frame that a subscriber named Rich sent to me and actually responded to. Firstly, right off the bat, the ad looks a little sketchy, starting off with the poor grammar and misspellings. Next, the poster claims that he's not storing the bed frame in his house anymore, but rather behind his buddy's storefront. This begs the question, why? Also, where is this storefront? What does it look like? If these weren't red flags enough, Lauderhill, the town in which this ad was posted, has an extremely high rate of crime. Rich explained in his email to me that he comes from a very poor background, and even though he saw the red flags in his post, he was willing to drive over to the location he received after texting the number on the ad. He drove to the location at 10:30 p.m., which turned out to be a closed-down looking thrift store. He stepped out of the car with the engine still running, and he said he knew to look straight for the bushes next to the storefront, where he could easily see 2 men hiding. He got back in his car and drove away and reported the ad. This was an incredibly creepy Craigslist post of a man looking to start an all-female band, specifically consisting of women aged 18 to 21. You could just assume by the looks of the ad and the man himself that he strongly considered typing 16 or 17 instead of 18. The ad calls for young girls who aren't afraid of older rocker dudes telling them what to do, and apparently that wasn't the only listing this guy posted. In one picture on this separate listing, the guitars and amps can really draw your attention away from the gross carpet, messy bookshelf, and bottle collection. But in the last picture, the man for some reason thought it was a good idea to capture his bandaged up foot in frame. This was a very transparently predatory Craigslist ad targeting young women. There's a section on Craigslist called Misconnections. This section is home to personal advertisements, which arrive after 2 people meet but are too shy or otherwise unable to exchange contact details. Like everywhere else on the website, weird things are posted in this section, such as this ad. The ad was posted by an anonymous man who seemed to be stalking a young boy. He said in the ad, "We've met on several occasions. Well, we haven't formally met, but I've seen you. You like to wear that Mets hat a lot. I love the Mets. If you like daddies, hit me up." The post actually included 2 photos of the boy on candid camera, one in a grocery store and one outside in a seemingly wooded area. The boy looked to be no older than 14. The ad was taken down the same day it was posted. This ad was posted in January of 2014 in Australia during a major heat wave. Temperatures were reaching up to 114 degrees Fahrenheit in certain regions, so this ad probably seemed like nothing short of a miracle at first glance. The ad offered free ice cream to anyone in the area, claiming they were doing it out of Christian courtesy. The ice cream truck would be parked in a location that would only be disclosed to people who contacted the poster. One person did end up contacting the poster of the ad, and was told to meet up at a certain parking lot outside of Kings Park. The boy and his brother who answered the ad, who said they arrived partially just to see if it was legit or not, did find the ice cream truck in the parking lot. But 2 police cars were also parked alongside it. It turned out the ice cream truck was stolen. The refrigerators in the ice cream truck were turned off and all the ice cream was melted. Who knows what they really meant by Christian courtesy? This one wasn't disturbing in the same sense of the others on this list, it's just creepy. This was an ad posted by a 26-year-old asking for a female roommate, who he would waive the rent fee for only if they were willing to create some kind of romantic relationship out of it. Being that this was a guy posting on Craigslist proud of his openness of his intentions, it's likely he may have wanted more than just a relationship, possibly some more immediate services. There's a lot of these kinds of posts offering free housing for young women for relationships or open minds in return. In July of 2015, The FBI arrested 39-year-old Nathan Bryan for allegedly trying to solicit children for sex by advertising his babysitting services on Craigslist. Federal investigators suspected that Bryan was using the ads to gain access to kids, though this wasn't enough to prove that he was guilty of anything. So the FBI posed as a father who was offering their child for sex on Craigslist. That's when they were contacted by Bryan, warranting his arrest. This was one of Bryan's many Craigslist postings where he advertised his babysitting services. It may not seem too bad on its own, but knowing who was behind this listing is what makes it truly horrifying, and that any other listing like this one could have been created by someone with completely masked intentions. This is Richard Beasley, a man who was sentenced to death for the murder of 3 men who responded to an ad he placed on Craigslist for a non-existent job. He was also convicted of the attempted murder of Scott Davis, a man who answered the Craigslist ad, who was then shot in the arm while escaping from Beasley. This is the only screenshot that could be found from the specific ad that he posted. The ad said, "Wanted, caretaker for farm. Simply watch over a 700-acre patch of hilly farmland and feed some cows. You get $300 a week and a nice 2-bedroom trailer. Someone older and single preferred, but we'll consider all. Relocation is a must. You must have a clean record and must be trustworthy. This is a permanent position. The farm is used mainly as a hunting preserve, is overrun with game, has a stocked 3-acre pond, but some beef cattle will be kept. Nearest neighbor is a mile away. The place is secluded and beautiful. It will be a real getaway for the right person. Job of a lifetime. If you are ready to relocate, please contact ASAP. Position will not stay open." 3 out of the 4 men who answered this ad were shot dead by Richard. This is another missed connections post seeking another unknowing individual. This one is much more disturbing, however, as the poster, or stalker rather, has the young girl's address. He even posted a picture of the 14-year-old girl's house. In the post, he wrote, "Dear Sarah, you don't know me yet, but I've been watching you these past 2 weeks. You are a beautiful girl who needs to be taught certain things, and I could teach you those things. I could give you all the money you could want, and much more. I can promise you nothing but an amazing life if you choose to run away with me." The rest is just both his and her personal info. Now, this ad was screenshotted by a few people before it was flagged enough times to be removed. I was never able to find more details, such as if the family was made aware of this, or if the poster was found, or even if it was just some kind of prank. This ad was posted on June 10th, 2014, under the free stuff section. It advertised a free couch in good condition that would be put out on the curb around 10 p.m. In a normal neighborhood, this would seem like a lucky find. However, this ad was posted in one of the worst areas in Detroit, and one of the most dangerous times to be wandering the streets. Not to mention that anyone living in the area that this ad was posted in would not be looking to give a couch away, rather looking to make any penny possible off of it. This was a screenshot taken of the ad by someone who came across it. There's no way of knowing if someone actually fell victim to this, but this ad just had too many red flags about it. Most likely a group of people waiting for a naive victim to rob or harm, like the bed frame listing mentioned earlier in this video. This Craigslist post was an alleged confession of a murderer who was gloating about his first killing to the people of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It said, "I wanted to thank Tulsa for letting me have my first kill. It all started here, so I was thinking it should also be my first. I was nervous as hell, but I will get over it. It was a stranger on stranger kill, so the police will have a difficult time. It will not be my last, though. Thinking about going to Oklahoma City for the next." This wasn't the only ad of its kind to pop up. In fact, there was a second one that I could not find a screenshot for, which apparently showed a picture of a victim's body and the poster gloating over his second killing. This one took place in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and while it didn't mention a link to the first post, it seemed like too much of a coincidence. This is a rather strange ad by a young man looking for a roommate. When visitors to the ad would be greeted by this picture, which looks like something taken from a horror movie, they likely would not take this ad very seriously and would never dream of taking this guy up on his offer. Now, if that intro picture isn't enough to creep someone out, some of the rules and aggressive writing underneath should do it. Some ground rules. If I ring the bell in the kitchen, it means you have to go to bed no matter what time it is, I do not like people staying up late. You may have a friend over, but if they speak too much, they must leave. I like peace and quiet. No Indian visitors. Never touch the shower curtains. If it's closed, you come and get me and I pull it back so you can shower. There's 2 other pictures, one of a dimly lit room and one with a garbage bag over a window. If this ad was legit, let's hope this guy never found a roommate. This last ad was very open about its poster's intentions, and it's titled Cannibal Looking for Willing Victim. This ad included very graphic, blurred images that would give you a good idea of what exactly was going on to the victims. The ad said I'm going to be very open about my intentions. I am a cannibal and I'm looking for a willing victim. He even uses the word victim. If it has been your dream to donate your body as food, please contact me as soon as possible. I will not be torturing you or providing you with a slow death. Think of this as sharing your generosity with somebody else. When I was 21 years old, I would be home alone at my parents' house a lot. We lived on a little pond which was directly in our backyard. On the other side of the pond was a little town park. Our neighbors were a bit spaced out. It was a pretty upscale, expensive block compared to the rest of the town, so the properties were big. I'm fully moved out now, but this was back when I was in college. My parents make a lot of money, and we have multiple homes, so often I was home alone. It was a random night in the summertime. I was off from school, so I can't remember if it was the weekend or a weekday, but odds are since I was home, it was a random weekday. I was in the back sunroom watching a show. That was my favorite room in the house in the summer because it was the most cozy and had the best breeze with all the windows open. I was right on the corner of the couch closest to the corner window when I heard splashing from outside, like in the pond. It could have been a goose or duck. Sometimes they'd fight in the water and make a bunch of splashing sounds. So at first I ignored it, but as it persisted, I decided to lower the volume on the TV and listen. I put my ear up to the window even, and I heard consistent splashing sounds, way too heavy to be from a duck or goose. It sounded like they were splashes from a person. I opened the door in the sunroom and stepped outside to the deck. I looked out to the pitch darkness of the backyard. I now heard a man's humming along with the splashes. Someone was definitely swimming in the water. They were trespassing. Each house on the pond owned a specific chunk of the pond. I stepped inside for a second to flick on the lights to the backyard deck. As I did this, just a bit of the pond was exposed, and the splashes and humming stopped. Whoever it was clearly saw me. I wondered if it was one of the neighbors going for a swim or something, which also just seemed weird because no one really swam in the pond ever. But honestly, whether it was or wasn't a neighbor, I wasn't going to confront whoever it was. I stepped back inside and turned off the lights, of course locking the door as well. I texted my brother who was away at college about it. He didn't answer right away. I was trying not to creep myself out over it, but watching TV after this was kind of hard. I couldn't focus on the show. I looked out the window, but all I could see outside was darkness. I still had the TV on in the background, not realizing how revealing the light from the TV would be outside. And then, I thought I heard something on the deck. I hurried to find the remote and turn off the TV, and as the room went black and silent, it took me a few seconds to adjust, and realize that there was the sound of someone's heavy breathing right outside one of the many windows in the room. I instantly laid down flat on the couch to try and hide myself, and after a short moment of silence, a deep voice from outside the window said, "I see you." My heart dropped into my stomach. I couldn't decide in the moment whether to speak or keep hiding, so I just blurted out, "Paul, is that you?" Paul was the name of one of our neighbors. I said this, clinging on to the hope that maybe it was him, and he was just messing with me. But the man outside didn't respond to this. I just heard footsteps walking away. As the barefoot-sounding footsteps faded to silence, I still laid flat on the couch, too afraid to move. I laid for a few minutes, before the thought to go check that all the doors were locked came to mind. I exploded off the couch and ran straight for the front door. It was locked, as was the side entrance door. After a little while longer and texting my entire family about what was going on, my dad told me to turn the backyard lights on and check if anyone was still out there. He basically told me to be the man of the house and protect it. So I listened and checked the back deck through the window. It was clear. I brought a big knife outside with me onto the deck, and I looked down. There were wet footprints that had half dried by then, but I could tell that they were barefoot footprints. I followed the trail of footprints around to the side part of the deck, and what I saw was nightmare fuel. The top part of someone's head, namely their eyes and forehead, was peering just over the edge of the deck from the ground below, looking at me as if he heard me coming and was waiting. As we made eye contact, he turned away, and by now I was ready to call 911. I did so before even telling my parents. I locked myself inside, waiting for them, and when they came, I felt instantly better. They asked if our family had any enemies or people who don't like us, or if we have any problem neighbors. Questions like this. They did do a quick sweep of the property and then left. I decided to shut every window that night and run the air conditioning just for added safety. When I awoke the next morning, I was just delighted to see sunlight. I don't believe that man ever returned to our house, and we still don't know who it could have been. I have a dog who I take for a walk 3 times a day. First in the morning, then in the afternoon, and finally at night. I take him on the same route every time, which is through our driveway exit, which leads to a cul-de-sac parking lot for the condominium complex we live in. This will make sense soon as to why I'm telling you this. On the night walk, I always go somewhat late. I'm not sure why, but it's been a habit ever since I've had him, and it's never been a problem for us. Until one night, I'd begin our final walk of the day and go our usual route. I have a flashlight with me as there are no lights at the parking lot, and I'm listening to music with only one AirPod as I feel it would be for the best just in case I heard something unusual. And I did. As I'm approaching the parking lot, I was hearing something. A voice of some kind that was up ahead of me, but I was completely zoned out in my own world of music as it was happening. But then my mind finally caught up and I stopped. I took the AirPod out and stood still to listen, just to see if I was only hearing things. And then it happened again, a voice that spoke ahead of me, but I couldn't see anyone, so I did the stupid thing and continued to carefully walk forward because I thought it was all in my head. But something didn't feel right about it. I stopped again after a few feet right next to where all of the cars were parked, and I had my flashlight pointed everywhere in front of me. I stayed listening, and the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me yet was hearing a muffled voice of what sounded like a kid say the word "help." My heart dropped so fast I couldn't move my legs. I frantically pointed my flashlight everywhere to see where it was coming from. I was sure it was coming from the cars, but I was completely thrown off by this. But there wasn't a kid in sight, or anyone nearby. It was just me and my dog, who didn't seem to notice anything as he was just sniffing some bushes nearby. And then I heard it again. The word "help" was spoken 3 more times, and it was coming from my left side where the cars were parked. It made me panic even more. I didn't know what to think of it, and I knew I wasn't imagining this when I saw my dog's ears perked up, and he was looking in the same direction I was facing after it happened. And that's when it hit me about how incredibly eerie all of this was. After hearing it multiple times, I realized the kid's voice didn't sound entirely like a kid. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like the mix of an adult and a child at the same time. And each time they called for help, not only was the voice always muffled, but it was spoken in a more generic statement as opposed to a cry for actual help every time. And I mean that literally. There was absolutely no change in the tone, inflection, sound, or anything of sorts. My dog and I ran straight home afterwards, and I tried to explain to my mom what happened. She was puzzled herself about what it could have been, and I suggested we call the cops on the off chance that there was actually someone in need of help, but she didn't think it was necessary. So many questions were conjuring up in my head. Why was the voice muffled? Was there someone in the car that I couldn't see? Or was it something darker waiting for me to move closer? I don't like to think too much about it, but whatever it was, it still makes me feel extremely disturbed to this day. This picture is where I had stopped and taken my AirPods out to listen, and I heard it up ahead on the left. This is where I had gotten closer and heard it on my left side. I'm aware that there's a condo complex on the right side, which some may think the noise was coming from, but it was in this direction facing the cars where my dog and I heard it, and you could see from this point of view that there's nothing to really indicate a noise coming from somewhere else. Also, at the time this happened, the cars that were parked were trucks and SUV types, so they were a lot larger and covering more space, thus making it harder to see from where I was standing. I never figured this out. What I'm about to tell you is the reason why my parents moved out of a house that was in the family for 3 generations. I've struggled with depression most of my life. It's hard for me to shake the feeling of being useless. I'm doing much better now, but when I was a kid, it was horrible. Because of that, I spent a lot of time alone in my room. My house was nestled in a very woodsy area. There were trees on 3 sides of it and a forest separating it from any neighbors. My room was pretty big for a bedroom. It was in the back corner of the house, so the windows on 2 walls faced the woods. It was honestly pretty scary for a kid my age. It didn't help that I was also scared of the dark. Things started happening when I was around 10 or so. I was in the 5th grade, and I was at the age where it wasn't acceptable to sleep in my parents' bed after a nightmare, but I was still accused of having an active imagination. The first thing I noticed was my nightlight. It had different color settings, so if I wanted, I could change the LED around. I liked keeping it on red, which is what I fell asleep to most nights. One night, though, I woke up randomly in the middle of the night, which was unusual for me. I was really tired and fell back asleep in under a minute, but before I did, I noticed that my nightlight was a different color than the red I always left on. I didn't think much of it until about a week later. One morning, I woke up and realized my nightlight was once again not set to red like it always was. I asked my parents why they were messing with my nightlight, but they were confused and told me they didn't know what I was talking about. I explained what had happened to them, and they told me that the thing had always been glitchy. They knew best, so I accepted that answer for a while. At least until one morning after waking up to see my nightlight unplugged completely. It was just sitting there on the floor. Once again, my parents dismissed my concern and told me my brain should be focused on school. My dad said I was getting too old for a nightlight anyway. A few days later, my nightlight was missing completely. It had seemingly evaporated out of existence. Now I knew my parents were lying to me. They probably thought I should have outgrown the nightlight by then and took matters into their own hands. This incident caused a massive fight between them and I since both of us accused the other of hiding it, and neither of us was budging. I couldn't believe my parents would blatantly lie to me about something like this, but there was nothing I could do. After that, things went back to normal for a week. That didn't last long though. 3 nights in a row, I woke up randomly in the middle of the night. Each time, I had no idea what was waking me up. After it happened a 4th time in a row, I told my parents. They told me that I was going through puberty and that changes to my body are natural. The next time it happened, I stayed awake instead of falling back asleep. A few minutes after I woke up, I heard faint rustling noises from my closet. My parents didn't believe me. My dad even checked my closet, and there was nothing in there besides old toys and posters. The next 4 days remained the most traumatizing nights I've ever experienced in my life. I'd been woken up only to hear rustling in my closet. It was torture. I couldn't take it anymore. I begged my parents to believe me, and my dad got angry. He dragged me to my closet to prove there was nothing in there. He started throwing toys around my room, clearing the closet bit by bit, yelling at me the whole time. That is, until he pulled one of the posters off the wall. My mother and father stared in horror at the massive hole in the wall the posters had concealed. My mom started screaming, and my dad pulled out a flashlight. The hole was way too deep to see where it led, so my dad ran outside and began inspecting the outside of the house. There was a tiny hole in the dirt at the base of the house, and a little digging revealed that it was more than a divot. There was literally a passageway from the woods to my room. My mom and I were out of the house that night to my aunt's house. We moved out shortly after this. I stayed at my aunt's house until we did. I don't like thinking about this experience, but I'm gonna have to face it eventually. My parents also refused to talk about this incident, and I think it's partly because they feel some blame for not taking me seriously. It's chilling to think that there was a stranger in my room every night for over a month. I have no idea what they wanted, and will probably never know. If your kids come to you with something that sounds abnormal, believe them. My name is Leo. To be completely honest with you, I'm a little lost in life right now. I won't get into it too much, but all you need to know is that my family situation is horrible. And for the past 3 years, I've tried to stay as far away from home as possible. My close friends from high school have been changing in ways I don't like, and I feel like my hometown has nothing to offer me anymore. I'm about to be a senior in college, and to be completely honest, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with my life after that. Enough with the sob story, though. I was in Berlin last year for whatever reason, probably searching for a sense of place or trying to find a direction in life. I remember the name of the bar I was in, Reduja. I was there alone, nothing I'm not used to. I was getting ready to leave when I felt around my pocket and realized my apartment keys were missing. Just my luck. I stumbled out of the bar and began walking toward my apartment anyway. The whole thing was locked up. There was no way I was getting in there, and it was way too late at night to get a replacement set. I'm not sure what most people would do in a situation like this, but my first thought was to start looking for a place to sleep. As if my luck wasn't bad enough, it started raining. Eventually, I decided to sleep under a nearby bridge. I didn't even know where I was, but I was out of the rain and safe, so I was happy. As I was drifting off, I began picking up on some faint voices coming from across the river. I sat back up and saw what looked like 5 men standing on the opposite side of the river along with a little boat that was tied off. They didn't seem to notice me. It took me less than a minute to realize what I was watching. There was an honest-to-God drug dealer or something going down right in front of me. My German isn't great, so I wasn't really able to make out what they were saying, but several briefcases and duffel bags were exchanging hands, so I filled in the blanks myself. I thought about finding a new spot, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself by moving. I figured I'd just wait for this to be over, then leave. All of a sudden, one of the men yelled something aggressively in German and pointed a gun at one of the other men. There was a brief moment of silence before the other guy put his hands up and began talking really quickly. It looked like he was being set up. The other men stripped the man at gunpoint of his clothing and started confiscating his belongings. I didn't feel safe there anymore and got up slowly to move. As I did, I heard one of the men shout what roughly translates to, "There's someone there." I started running, not even turning to look at them. They shouted more things at me, but the only words I was able to understand were, "Don't shoot." I ran until I threw up and nearly passed out due to drunken exhaustion. There was no way they'd be able to catch me, but they could have easily killed me. Sometimes I still think about how I could have lost my life that night if those men had decided to fire at me. Sometimes I feel like I'm fated to run forever. It was a normal Friday afternoon at my high school. I was walking down a hallway with my friend Emma as she talked about God knows what. I was just trying to get through the day because I honestly had a lot to deal with at home as well as at school, being that my foster parents weren't the nicest people, to say the least. As we walked past the lunchroom, I suddenly had to use the bathroom. I asked Emma if she had to go. She said no and that she would wait outside for me. I went into the bathroom and immediately noticed no one else was in there. I thought to myself, that was weird, because out of the multiple bathrooms in the school, this one was always packed at any given time. I shrugged it off and went into a stall, and a few seconds after getting in the stall and sitting down, I heard the bathroom entrance door open and shut abruptly, and someone entering the bathroom, but I didn't hear them move after entering. I didn't think anything of this. It wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Maybe it was someone hiding from an admin. I went about my business. I stood up to button my jeans and read the writing on the bathroom wall. There was a bunch of random quotes and rants about teachers. Then I heard the door open again, and I assumed whoever was in here had left. I came out of the stall. and as I left the bathroom, Emma was looking at me with a weird face, almost like a "what the hell did I just see" face. I asked her what was up, and she asked me, "Who was that standing right behind you in the bathroom stall?" I got chills. I told her no one was in the stall with me and to stop fucking with me. She promised me she wasn't. She told me she actually came in seconds before I came out because she realized she did need to go. But then she saw someone else in the stall, standing with their shoes touching the back of mine. That's how close they were behind me in the stall. And she said she left immediately, not wanting to witness whatever was going on. I reiterated again I was the only one in the stall. However, I had heard someone come in, but I never heard them use the bathroom, and I had assumed they were hiding from an admin. That's when she told me no one went near the door until she came in seconds before I came out. I didn't believe in the paranormal, but this made my stomach sink. I found an admin and told her about it, and she pretty much tried to assure me that it didn't happen, that Emma was probably just messing with me. But Emma was never one to take things seriously or be serious in general, so when she looked me in the eyes with a serious face and told me word for word what she saw, I felt like it actually happened, and something really was in there with me, along with the fact that I heard the bathroom door open and close twice. I'm 18 now, and I haven't forgotten it since. This happened long ago when I was renting a small house in the town that I got my first real big girl job at. It was a small one-floor house with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and just enough living space for myself and occasionally hosting some people. I had been living there for a few weeks already. All was fine. The landlord, who I'll just call Michelle, was really friendly and understanding. I think she rented to me because she didn't want a male renting out her house. I'll skip unnecessary details and get right to the point. Something very weird started happening a few weeks into living there. One regular work night, I got a knock at the door. I went to the other side and said, "Who is it?" and no one responded. I didn't open it. No one should be knocking on my door late at night. It was early the next morning. I had finished getting ready for work and was about to leave. I opened my front door and saw a big post-it note taped to the storm door. It said, "Hello, beautiful." I right away remembered the knocks on the door from last night. It was no doubt the same person, but the big question was, who could it be? I crumpled it out of disgust and threw it in the trash, hoping and assuming it would be a one-and-done thing. It was that night that I got another knock at the door. This time a little earlier, while I was cooking dinner. I went over to the door, this time not saying anything, just listening. There was no peephole or glass to look through to the other side. I had no way of seeing who was there without opening the door, and that wasn't going to happen, as the storm door didn't lock. But this was the second night in a row, and now I was realizing this was some kind of stalker situation. I called my mom and dad to ask for advice, and really, they didn't even know what to say. My dad, who was a retired police officer, said that if I called the cops, they wouldn't really be of any help unless they were catching the person in the act. My dad advised me to not go outside late at night for a while, don't answer the door, and if it persists, that he'd come to town and spend a few days with me. So that was the advice I followed. The next morning, the first thing I did was check the storm door for another note, and part of me died inside when I saw another note stuck to the glass. This one said, "I like to watch you." I took a picture of it with my phone and sent it to not only my family, but Michelle as well. I asked Michelle if she had any kinds of issues with certain men or any stalkers. She acted appalled and shocked when I sent her a picture of the note and told her about the knocks. She assured me that she didn't have any stalkers and that she was in a long-term relationship. Still, I wasn't entirely convinced. I left a note on the door after work that day, saying if you're looking for Michelle, she does not live here. She only rents this house out. If you continue to come here, I will be reporting this to the police. Doing this gave me a level of comfort, actually. I thought this would end things. That night, every waking minute was spent with anxiety, worrying about hearing knocks at the door again. To my relief, there were none tonight. I went to sleep in relative peace, thinking my note worked. The next morning, I opened the door and removed my note from the glass, but then realized it wasn't my note. It was a new note, and it said, "I'm not looking for Michelle, I'm looking for you." And then it said my name, followed with, "I like watching you," like it said in the previous note. I sent it to my dad right away. I felt seriously ill. My dad packed a bag and drove up first thing. He was at my house by the time I got home from work. And work that day was rough because I couldn't think of anything except for this horrific situation. I even wondered if someone in my office could have been doing this, like this creepy guy Fernando. My dad and I waited to call the police together until later in the night when we figured whoever was doing this may be hiding out there already. We wanted them to see the police presence. We spoke with an officer outside. My dad said it must have been a busy night since they only sent one. My dad being a retired police officer obviously didn't hurt in this whole situation. After the officer left with his report, my dad stayed out on the front stoop for hours, even after I went to sleep. Obviously the person didn't return that night, and I moved out once I was able to pack all my things. Michelle was completely understanding. Thankfully, whoever was stalking me at that house didn't follow me to my new place, likely eliminating the possibility that it was a coworker. So I will likely never know who it was. I'll be honest with you, I've probably spent more time chasing women than I'd like to admit. I've had to tone it down a lot since college, partly because of what I'm about to tell you. I went to school in California, and while I haven't been back in a while, when I was there, the culture was very open. And when I say open, I mean sexual. This honestly could have been true for other colleges in other states at the time, but I really wouldn't know. It was my sophomore year, and I had just finished pledging the fraternity Pike. About halfway through the semester though, I was getting sick of only talking to sorority girls that seemed to know half the guys in every frat. It was honestly a little gross, and I started developing a fear that every girl I was interested in had been with several people I personally knew. I tried my luck and created a Tinder profile. It wasn't long before I matched with someone whose interests seemed to match mine. We started talking, and things were going well. After a few days, we made plans to meet up at a local college bar called Tap House on a Saturday night. This was actually my favorite bar in the area because it had pool tables and I had been clearing racks since I was 10 years old. I remember getting there a little early so I could secure a table and warm my muscles up a bit. An hour passed though, and I came to terms with the fact that I had probably been stood up. I was trying to decide whether I should salvage the night or just go home and play online chess when I got a notification. To my surprise, it was Yamel, the girl I was waiting on, telling me she had just arrived. I greeted her, and she apologized for being late. We got some drinks, played some pool, and got to know each other. She was Latina and a heavy drinker, so I got plastered just trying to keep up. At one point, she asked for my Instagram, which I gave to her. 10 seconds later, I found myself staring at a collection of explicit photos she had just sent me. I was confused, but in my drunken state, I wasn't going to complain. Before I could even respond, she told me, "Your turn," which I figured could only mean one thing. Honestly, if I hadn't been so drunk, I probably would have questioned why we were sending pictures to each other when we were literally 5 feet apart, but I didn't have the foresight. I complied with her request. We laughed about the whole thing, and that was that. A few hours later, things at the bar were starting to wind down. I was planning on inviting her to my place, but she beat me to it, asking if I could spend the night at hers. I agreed, and we left the bar. I couldn't even walk in a straight line. It was honestly embarrassing. We Ubered to her apartment, which was actually in Oakland, something I hadn't realized before. Honestly, red flags should have been going off in my brain the moment we crossed into Oakland. She unlocked the door of her apartment and stepped aside so I could go first. I took a few steps inside and heard the door shut behind me. It was pitch black in there. As I was turning around to ask her to flip some lights on, the room lit up. To my horror, I wasn't facing a harmless 5'2" girl anymore. Instead, 2 massive bald dudes with tank tops were standing in front of the door with their hands clasped. I turned around, and there was another white bald dude in front of me. I wish I could tell you more about the room I was in, but it was honestly difficult for me to recall small details of that night. I couldn't fight or flee, so I just froze. The guy in front of me began telling me my own name, birthday, and age. He then went on to say that the girl I had just gone out with was 17, meaning I had received and sent explicit pictures to a minor. He then suggested that I do what I was told, which I did. The 2 guys behind me confiscated my phone, wallet, and keys, all of which I gave up without a fight. I asked the guy in front of me what he wanted, and and he basically told me that he was a major distributor of illicit substances in Northern California. He told me that I'd be outed as a pedophile if I didn't distribute his product to my fraternity and university. I wish I could remember more specifics. The two men behind me then gave me a piece of paper and told me to write down my address, followed by a list of names and numbers for as many students as I knew. I told them that I'd need my phone to complete the list, so one of them held it firmly in front of me and let me scroll through. All three of them were hovering over me now, knowing I was basically checkmated. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but the literal second I saw a chance, I ran. I was too drunk to think about the consequences of those pictures on my phone. I narrowly escaped out the door I had entered from and ran as fast as I possibly could. It's not like I was safe though. I was still smack dab in one of the most dangerous places in America. Eventually, I found a nice looking house and begged them to open up. I pleaded with them to let me use their phone and call 911, and then I told the police everything. But of course, I didn't remember the address of that girl's apartment. An officer picked me up and took down a report before asking me if I would be okay leading them back to that apartment. I was actually able to retrace the way I had run, and I waited in one of the squad cars as the police barged in. After a few minutes, an officer told me that the place was completely deserted and there were not any signs that people had even been there. In the following weeks, the police actually took my report seriously and launched a full-scale investigation. They concluded that it was probably gang-related, but were never able to arrest anyone. That was years ago. I bet this incident has been swept under the rug of Oakland's rampant crime and drug-related activity. In all honesty, what happened to me all those years ago is probably nowhere near the top of the list when it comes to that godforsaken place. I haven't used a dating app since. I've been smoking cigarettes every day for years. Before you judge me, let me just say that I recently started seeing a therapist for my nicotine addiction. Unfortunately, it hasn't helped much. The only thing worse than my nicotine addiction is my sleep schedule. I don't know what it is. I find myself staying up hours past midnight and rarely get out of bed before noon. While I'm trying to fix these parts of my life, they're extremely relevant to what I'm about to tell you. It began a few months ago. I was standing on my balcony, like I do most nights, smoking a cigarette. I live in a really secluded neighborhood. It's not like the houses around here are right next to each other. Despite this, I have a neighbor whose fence I can see over if I'm standing on my balcony. I'm not nosy or anything, but this particular night, I was looking into his yard. I had never met the guy, but I assumed he lived alone since there was only ever a navy blue BMW parked in his driveway. But not this night, though. There was a black van I'd never seen before sitting in front of his house. I didn't make anything of it, just noting the coincidence to myself. The next night, though, I made it a point to pay attention to his yard, and the same black van was parked there again. I didn't assume something sinister was going on. I was more intrigued than anything. The following morning, I went up to my balcony and looked into his yard. The van was gone. For the remainder of the week, I made a game out of observing the van at night, theorizing its purpose. I said I wasn't nosy, but I sure am obsessive. It's actually the main reason most of my friends drifted out of my life. I wasn't going to do more than observe, though. It wasn't my business or place to poke around further. That is, until one night, when I saw something that completely changed my perspective of the situation. I was up later than usual. It was maybe 5 in the morning. The van was there, as it had been the past several nights. I was smoking my last cigarette when my neighbor actually walked outside, something I hadn't seen yet. I watched as he made his way to the van, carrying what appeared to be a long black bag. It almost looked like a set of golf clubs, only much heavier. After opening the van's sliding door, he delicately placed the bag inside. He promptly got in the driver's seat and sped off. I was dumbfounded. I had absolutely no idea what he could have been carrying. I was exhausted though, so I figured I'd think about it more the next morning. The next day, I decided that I'd go out on my balcony a little earlier and wait for the van to arrive at his house. I brought my laptop up there so I could get some work done and wait. It was around 10 p.m. and the van wasn't in the driveway, but around 1 a.m. the van pulled in. I quickly shut my laptop and watched. Nothing happened for a good several minutes, like the van just sat there, engine running and all. After about 5 minutes, the driver door opened and there he was. I watched as he went around to the side of the van, then slid the door open and pulled out the same bag that he had put in the night before. He seemed to be struggling this time around, visibly trying not to crack under the weight of whatever was in there. After waddling a few slow steps, both he and the bag disappeared into his house. I didn't know what to think. I thought about waiting there until 5 a.m. again, but that would be far too taxing on my brain. Something was definitely wrong though, and I was determined to find out what. The next morning, I flipped a coin and ultimately decided to follow his van when he pulled out that night. After a pretty unproductive day, I went up to my balcony around 4 a.m. and waited, cigarette in hand. As soon as I saw movement in his driveway, I rushed downstairs, grabbed my keys, and got in my car. I turned my headlights off and waited for the van to turn onto the main road. Once it did, I began tailing it. After 20 minutes of driving, he pulled onto a dirt path that looked like it led into the woods. It did. I followed, and the woods actually started thinning up a bit. It seemed like this path had once been a main road or something. We drove for another few minutes before I realized what his destination was. There was a deserted gas station literally tucked away in some clearing in the woods, and right in front of it was the BMW I'd always seen parked in his driveway. I feared I was getting too close, so I turned my car around and parked across the street from the dirt road. I must have waited there an hour. His BMW finally pulled out of the clearing. Nervously, I started driving back up the path, not sure what I'd find. I pulled over on the side of the road and started walking towards the gas station. It was eerie. The front door was locked. I walked around to the side. That was locked as well. So was the back door. I needed to know what was inside. There was a row of windows that I tried to open, but none of them would budge. Against my better judgment, I picked up a rock and slammed it into one of the windows. It shattered pretty easily, but there must have been a security system in that place because alarm bells started blaring. I sprinted back to my car, the whole time wondering why an abandoned gas station would be rigged with an alarm system. As I sped out of there, I called 911 and gave them a vague description before hanging up. I got back to my house and ran inside, my heart still racing. The next morning, I woke up hoping the whole thing had blown over. Boy, was I wrong. I went up to my balcony to see like 8 police cars in my neighbor's driveway, lights flashing and everything. I watched as an officer escorted my neighbor out of his house in handcuffs. One by one, the police cars drove away and I was left to my imagination. I lit a cigarette and stood there, finally alone with my thoughts. I've asked the police for details on several occasions, but they would never answer my questions. I've even tried driving back up to that gas station, but the whole road had been blocked off. Maybe one day I'll work up the courage to walk through the woods and go looking for answers. I'm not somebody who grew up with any kind of sleep disorders, such as sleep paralysis or night terrors. I've always been a very heavy sleeper, so that's why when what I'm about to tell you started happening, it was a shock to me. We all have the occasional nightmare. I used to call nightmares a free, 3D immersive horror movie. To most, that will probably sound freakish, but in a weird way, I sometimes like the thrill of waking up after a nightmare. I was living with my one roommate, Patricia. I just called her Trish. We had very different schedules with work, so we didn't see each other much besides on the weekends. This happened in July. I remember because it was so hot out that I had the window AC unit on full blast every night, which also provided a white noise that helped me sleep better. It was the first night that I had the nightmare, a few days after my ex and I had broken up, and life wasn't exactly the best. I had a dream that I vaguely remember for the most part, but the part that I vividly remember is being in a room full of my family members sitting quietly around a dinner table, and standing across the table from me was what I could best describe to be a creature that looked like one of the aliens from the movie Signs, only with horns and claws. It looked like what you'd imagine a sleep paralysis demon to look like, only I was still fully asleep and dreaming. The next thing I knew, the thing was standing next to me, looking down at me. I started to run away in my dream until I was in my room, or I guess my brain's version of my room. That was the last of that dream I remember before waking up. My room was pitch black and the AC fan was on full blast. My heart was racing a bit from the dream, and I sat there thinking, wow, that was a creepy dream. I looked around the room naturally before laying back down and going to sleep. The following night, I woke up in the middle of the night to my bedroom door open, which I usually 99% of the time would leave shut unless I was drinking. My immediate thought was that it was Trish checking if I was home. I went up to go shut it and went back to sleep fairly quickly. I asked Trish if she came in my room the next day via text, and she told me she did not. So it was always possible I just took a midnight trip to the bathroom or kitchen that I didn't remember. It was the following night that I had another nightmare. That same demon creature from my previous dream appeared again in this one. This one was a lot more disturbing. Instead of being with my family, I was in a dark, square, empty room with the thing, and it kept getting closer to me. Oddly, I don't remember the thing actually moving its limbs to walk. I just remember that it kept getting closer and closer until it was on top of me. And then, like I couldn't even move, the thing took a claw to my thigh and scratched me, and I actually think I felt the pain in my dream. Then, the next thing I remember is waking up. I don't mean I woke up right after that. I mean I don't remember what happened after that in the dream. But it was dark in the room once again, AC on full blast. I felt a slight stinging feeling on my upper thigh. I felt it with my hand, and I actually felt like I felt something on the skin. I rushed to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and I screamed out loud when I saw a gash in my thigh. I went to Trish's room and turned on the light, waking her up. She asked how the fuck I got that, and I screamed I don't know. We went to my room together and flipped off all the sheets and covers off the bed, looking for any kinds of bugs or spiders or any sharp object I could have laid down on, which, yes, I understand makes no sense, but what else were we to think? Trish then looked at me and said, "Wait," and put her finger to her lip. She turned off my AC unit, and for the first time in days, the room went quiet. It all became sickeningly clear in an instant, as we both heard a sound from under my bed. The kind of faint sound that you sense from another person just existing in the room. I'm impressed at both of our ability to not scream right on the spot as we both looked at the bed and then at each other, and then left the room and then the apartment. We knocked on the neighboring apartment door until he answered. We asked him for help. Someone was in our apartment. He was an older guy, so I don't think we expected him to go fight some stranger in our apartment. He let us use his phone to call 911. At some point while waiting for the police, we heard a door outside slam shut. It sounded like our door. None of us could look out the window in time to see who it was. When the police got there, we confirmed the intruder was gone. We did leave all the lights on in the apartment when we ran away though, and left in a rather sudden fashion, so the intruder definitely knew that we knew. And then came the reflection I had of my dreams, and what they actually meant. That demon in my dreams was supposed to be him, even in the first dream. And with my door being open that night, that means he or she may have been roaming around our apartment at night, possibly eating our food. And to think this person actually scratched my thigh so hard it left a mark, it's actually really disturbing to think about. This forever changed my outlook on dreams and nightmares. This happened when I was a little kid living in our old house in Suffolk County, Long Island. I'm gonna say I was about 6 or 7 years old. My older brother and I shared a bedroom on the top floor that used to be a separate apartment that my dad rented out to an old lady, but she moved out, and so the upstairs was mainly for my older brother and I at that point. The layout was as follows. At the top of the stairs, on the left was our bedroom, which used to be the old woman's living room. Straight ahead was the bathroom, and to the right was an extra kitchen and a small bedroom. We had a million toys in our room, as the room itself was huge, and it also had 2 parallel crawl-in closets on opposite sides of the room where we stored a million other toys and board games and stuff like that. There was one toy though, a race car with a bunch of buttons on it. The buttons would make the car's lights turn on momentarily and play varying sound effects such as honking, revving, and driving sounds, and a little rock song. It was a toy we had for like ever, because it was originally a gift from my brother when he was a little younger. It was a random night. My brother and I were both in bed, not yet asleep, when suddenly, like a jump scare from a scary movie, the loud revving sound of that car toy suddenly activated, along with the lights of the car in the middle of the room. I looked at the car and instantly got scared and accused my brother Luke of doing that to scare me. He was laughing hysterically, saying he didn't do it. I was completely terrified. The toy then stopped making noises and went quiet. I was extremely unsettled, as any little kid would be, but nevertheless, time marched on and I fell asleep. It wasn't for a while until something else happened. One night, when Luke and I were both in bed again, we both heard a weird thud in the room. Luke insisted on trying to creep me out, saying there was a ghost in the room or something, and I kept yelling at him to shut up or I'd get Mom. He kept laughing until we both noticed a light in the corner of the room. It was the toy car again. I got out from the bed and ran straight down the stairs yelling for my mom. I got to my parents' room and yelled there's something in our room. I'm sure I gave a little 7-year-old spiel about how there's a ghost in the room, hearing a thud and the lights on the toy car turning on. Luke entered the room, and my mom defaulted to telling him to knock it off if he's trying to scare me. He said how could he turn the lights of the car on from his bed? I slept in my parents' room that night because I was too scared to sleep upstairs. It was a long while after that night and nothing happened. Not until one night. Luke was not in the room. My guess is he was having a sleepover with one of his many friends. I was sleeping in the room by myself that night. I had long since tucked that car away in the small bedroom across the hall because it freaked me out. After my mom kissed me goodnight, I asked her to keep the door open since I was always scared when I was alone in the room. I rolled on my side and tried to go to sleep. But being that I was scared of being alone, I had a hard time getting tired that night. I felt wide awake. Then, there was a sound I can't explain that came from down the hall. I flipped over to face the door, and the toy car rolled into the room with its lights on. I let out a scream straight from the bottom of my stomach as I cried for my mom and pressed my body up against the wall. Moments later, my parents both came up the stairs into the room, noticing the car on the floor. I screamed that someone pushed the car into the room. My dad went to go check the other rooms, but said there was no one there. There weren't any places to hide up there besides the closets and under the beds, and my dad checked all of them. I don't know what my parents thought in that moment. On one hand, they probably thought the toy was malfunctioning or it's just my imagination. But on the other hand, I think they were also slightly freaked out. That toy car didn't have a feature to move on its own. My dad smashed the toy and threw it in the neighbor's trash to make me feel better. I slept in their room for a while until my dad forced me back upstairs eventually. This story is the reason why I believe in the paranormal and something after death.
I lived on a farm ranch with my grandparents. My parents kicked me out and I couldn't afford to rent an apartment, so they let me stay with them for a fraction of the cost. I slept in a bedroom on the first floor. The smell of old people was much more pungent in this room. It was littered with my grandma's religious relics. I had to deal with a giant painting of Jesus staring at me while I slept. Weird things didn't start actually happening until my second week of living there. I got home from my job working at a small corner store in town, and by then it was dark out. While unlocking the front door, I could hear footsteps out in the crops. I had to assume there was somebody trying to steal my grandpa's produce. I tiptoed closer to get a better look, making sure to stay away from any fallen leaves or anything that could make some noise. There was indeed somebody in the crops, but they were crawling on all fours, as if sneaking around. I could have confronted them, but that might have ended in trouble, so I went back inside to wake my grandpa. He went outside screaming like a madman with his rifle in hand. It was something along the lines of, "If I ever catch you here on my farm, I won't hesitate to blow your brains out." That seemed like more than enough to scare anyone off the property, but the next night, while asleep, things got stranger. I woke up and heard laughing outside my window. There was somebody standing there looking into the bedroom. He seemed to notice me as I sat up, and he walked away. I told my grandpa again. This time he was really pissed. He stomped to his closet, pulled out his rifle, and stomped over to the front door with me right behind him. This time when he opened the door, something immediately grabbed a hold of his leg, causing him to trip. I jumped onto the hostile, taking him down easily as he was already in a crouched position. My grandpa managed to get up, grabbing his gun and pointing it at the guy. I called the sheriff while Grandpa had the guy at gunpoint. I suddenly heard a scream while on the phone. It was my grandpa. I dropped the phone almost with tears in my eyes, fearing the worst had happened. I got to the stoop, and Grandpa was on the ground with his hand on his nose. He was bleeding. Someone else had come along, shoved him to the ground, and punched him in the nose before taking off. I wish I'd gone after those sickos with a gun. Who punches an elderly man in the face? In the end, the sheriff arrived for nothing, and my grandpa installed a camera system aimed towards the crops. Last month I got home late one night after hanging out with my sister, brother-in-law, and a few of their friends. I walked up to the stoop and saw my mom left a note on the door telling me to take out the garbage cans to the front. I made a point of being really quiet since mostly everyone was asleep by that time. When I got to the side of our house by the garbage cans, I could hear voices coming from our backyard. I took a peek over the top of the fence. There were two people standing by our patio table. I was freaked out. You could understand why. I had to run inside to tell my mom. My dad doesn't live with us, otherwise I would have gotten him. We only made it out her bedroom door when we noticed the two people from the backyard coming up the steps. I shoved my mom to the window, basically forcing her to jump out onto the tiny ledge below. I somehow got her to do so, and while hopping out myself, the two intruders entered the room. I only caught the briefest glimpse at them before hopping down to the ledge myself and then down to the grass. Me and my mom booked it to the neighbor's house. 2 weeks later, when we had just started to move past the incident, the sound of the phone ringing at 3 a.m. woke me. It kept ringing non-stop. It didn't go to voicemail. My mom got up after like the 10th ring. We looked at each other and let it be. The phone rang for another good 10 minutes straight until my mom finally yanked the phone cord out of the modem. We slept with it off that night. I was sure it had something to do with the break-in. Two weird things like that don't happen so close together without them being linked somehow. The next day, my mom got a text message on her phone. It said, "Why didn't you pick up?" This was only a week ago, and we're still shitting ourselves, worrying when the next incident might happen. A 14-year-old girl was asleep in her room on a school night when she apparently woke and remembered that she had homework due the next day that she didn't even start. She flicked her light on and began to work on it. The clock read exactly 1:15 a.m. Over the sound of pencil lead pushing onto the paper, there were faint noises coming from inside the walls. She stopped writing, and the sounds became more clear. It was as if something was being pushed from inside the walls. There was a storage space right next to her bed, with a big square door that comes off the wall to enter. The girl started screaming for her mom, and the noises suddenly became exaggerated, as if something were running in there. The door to the wall popped off, and a figure emerged. The girl's mother and father could hear the screams even through 3 closed doors. When the girl's father came to the room, he found a tall and overweight white man covering the girl's mouth with his hand. The fight was over in a matter of seconds, with a few good punches to the man's gut. 2 pairs of the girl's underwear were found in the man's pocket before he was arrested. Me and my wife were spending the night together in Cedar Beach. Unfortunately, the place closes at 9:30, and the place was miles from basically anywhere. So we were pretty much stuck with nothing to do at the beach at 9:30 at night. So we just took a walk through the wet sand until 10. For the first half of the walk, we didn't see a single person on the whole beach. Then we turned around to head back. About 20 feet into us walking back in the direction we came, we both picked up on something. There were more than 2 pairs of footprints in the sand. Ours were more washed away by then, but there were 2 other sets of footprints that weren't there before. These a little more recent. They seemed to set off up away from the wet sand where there would be no more footprints. You may think it was just another couple taking a late night stroll, but we hadn't seen anyone for the good mile or two we walked, so we were spooked. I used the flashlight app on my iPhone to scan around the nearby dunes. I even went as far as calling out asking if somebody was there. I told my wife to wait there while I headed over to the garbage pails. It seemed like the only place somebody could be hiding. It was clear. I shined the light further down, revealing a tunnel that probably led to a parking lot. I moved closer until I could actually see a little into the tunnel, and as soon as I could, I shut the light off. There were two things in there. I don't even know if I should call them humans, because from what I saw, they looked like hunched, naked creatures huddled in there. They had skin to match that of a medium dark-skinned Caucasian, but with much more flaky, wrinkly skin. I didn't mutter a word. I just stomped through the sand to my wife, pulling her with me as we ran back in the direction of the car. We made it back to the car in about 5 minutes, completely out of breath. We got in the car, and I finally explained what I saw to my wife. She looked at me like I was crazy, and she still does. But can you blame her? I'm sure you're not even taking this seriously. I reported my sighting to the proper authorities the following day, and have been coming back to the beach at night once a week to try and find the creatures once more. I work as a night janitor at the local high school. I would 95% of the time be the only one working the night shift because there wasn't really a need for more than one. I always start with the downstairs classrooms and work my way up to the upstairs classrooms. The cafeteria, gym, auditorium, nurse's office, those were all responsibilities of the morning and afternoon guys. So since I was always alone, I would commonly have a bunch of radios sitting around the hallways playing loud music, like I did this one night. The upstairs of the school was shaped like a U rather than an O, so to go around to the other side, there was only one way. I was mopping the floor in one of the social studies classrooms when I noticed, from all the way across the other side of the school, the lights to one of the classrooms turned on. I don't mean it was left on. I always shut the lights to every room I wasn't in. I mean the lights turned on. I stood there with chills running through my body. There was somebody walking over to the window. They stopped and stared straight over to me through the window. It was the most disturbing thing I had ever witnessed. I didn't know what to do. Confront them? Run away? Call the police? I got closer to the window. It was somebody who looked like they were in their 30s or 40s. He had black hair, and I could see a lot of facial hair. He raised his hand and began slowly waving at me. I pulled the blinds to the room shut and tried to catch my breath. Tried to sort out my options. When I lifted the blinds back up, the light from the room across the school was off. My heart went back into panic mode. He was surely on his way over to this classroom. Right then, the option to run seemed best, and so I did. I ran down the stairs and out the back door of the school, not giving a second damn about anything but me and my life. Security cameras revealed that sometime in the night, the man emerged from the basement of the school and began wandering around. Getting a closer look at his face, I could see just how disturbed it made me feel. He was not a pleasant-looking man. The creepiest thing, though, was the camera revealed him going back down into the basement and never coming out. He was never found down there, though, which makes me question if there's some hidden rooms or exits down there. Lately, doing this job has never been more terrifying. I used to work as a house cleaner when I was a 17-year-old guy trying to save up for college. The person I worked for the longest was a man named Jeffrey. I only spoke with him once when I met him, and a few times in between when he came home early from his job. That was it. I couldn't tell you if he seemed normal or not. He had a very serious rule, though, not to go into his basement. He even left a big sign on the door. The curiosity ate away at me, but I did my best not to sneak any peeks. So one day, while I was dusting the furniture in his room, I just got a little snoopy and started going through his drawers. Don't ask me why. In his bigger drawers, there was just a bunch of clothing. I started going through the smaller drawers and found things like cameras, batteries, photo albums, and various knickknacks. Same thing in the middle drawer, but in the bottom one, I found a small wooden box sitting perfectly in the corner. It needed a key to open it, but I had actually taken notice to a small key that had been hanging on his keyring in the kitchen. It looked like it could fit in this lock. When I tried it, surely enough, the key twisted in the socket and opened the lock. What I found was disturbing. There was a pile of black and white photos. The first ones were just pictures of the house, but then eventually, I was in every single photo, in every single room of the house, including the bathroom. The most disturbing picture was a colored one that stood out from the rest. It was taken from outside one of the windows, aimed to me when I was in the kitchen. I put the pictures back in the box, except for a select few to use as possible evidence for something that I feared might happen. I locked it back up and put it in the drawer. I left everything else in the bedroom as is. I was about to leave the house and never return when I passed the basement door. Now that I wasn't coming back, I figured I should check out the basement so that the curiosity wouldn't forever eat away at me. I stepped inside and flicked the lights on. The air down there smelled really bad, like rotting animals. There were weird posters on the walls, a lot of erotic ones. I was shocked to even see some with boys and girls that looked under 18. There were 2 doors leading to either rooms or closets. I didn't go into them, but the horrid smell was the worst by those 2 doors. I finally realized there was a buzzing sound whenever I moved. I noticed in the corner there was a ceiling camera pointing right at me, but after noticing it, it seemed to stop moving completely. That was my cue to get out of that house. I drove home to safety. Jeffrey tried calling me one time after this. I didn't pick up. He didn't leave a message. I'm glad I never gave him my address. I was getting off from work at Stop and Shop after doing the midnight shift. When me and the only other guy working at the time went to our cars, a black pickup truck pulled up next to us. There was a man and woman inside. They looked like dirty hillbilly rednecks. The guy had a mustache and a beard, with a cap on and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. The woman had dirty-looking hair. Then again, her whole face looked dirty. When they stopped in front of us, blocking our path, the guy sitting inside asked us if we have any spare change for gas. My coworker dug through his pockets and dropped 2 quarters in the man's hand. I handed him $1 in hopes that he would just drive off. The guy looked at the money in his hand, then looked back at us. "I'm gonna need more than that," he said. We apologized and told him that that's all we had. "Bullshit," he said. I could see my coworker was getting just as nervous as I was. The woman in the passenger seat had a devilish-looking smile on her face. I walked around their car and speed-walked to my car, as did my coworker. I could see the man was spinning his pickup truck around. I turned the car on and immediately put it in drive and sped out of the parking lot. They seemed to be following me at first, but I eventually lost them. I pulled into a gas station and texted my coworker to make sure he was alright. He texted back saying he was fine. I wish it ended there, but a pair of headlights entered the gas station. It was the pickup truck. I got back in my car. He tried to block me by pulling up in front of me. The woman in the car pulled a gun and started to lower the window. I yanked it in reverse right out of the parking lot. My back window cracked as it was hit by a bullet. I somehow managed to lose them once more and make it home alive. I found 2 more bullet marks on my car. It's so scary to think how close I was to dying. And for what? Unfortunately, there are so many messed up people in this world. Me and Andrew, my half-sister's cousin, were 18 years old at the time. We decided to go exploring in the abandoned asylum in our town. It was way past dark, there were no cars on the road, so it was probably after midnight. Andrew drove. We both brought our video cameras in hopes to catch some interesting footage. YouTube was only 2 or 3 years old at the time, and exploring abandoned places was a pretty big thing for YouTube videos back then, so we thought it would be cool. We had to crawl under a hole in the fence that someone else had cut. We both brought along flashlights, of course. We got in through one of the broken windows. There were a few planks on the floor by the window that had once been planked up against the window to prevent anyone from entering. We began our search, both flashlights on, along with Andrew's camera, which had night vision capabilities. There was nothing but broken glass and graffiti everywhere. There were a few cracks and holes in the wood floors that led to blackness below. We didn't dare shine our lights down there. We both shared a few laughs, but I was creeped out as hell in there, and I knew he was too. The place was huge. We ended up in a small room with a dental chair and other equipment. It was strangely unsettling. The most unsettling room upstairs, however, was the bathroom. When we were in there, we heard a constant dripping sound coming from one of the stalls. When we tried to open it, it was locked. The opening at the bottom was far too small to crawl through, so we just left that room in a hurry, very creeped out. Behind one door, we found a stairway leading upstairs or downstairs. We wanted the video to be as scary as possible, so of course, like 2 teenage guys would, we went downstairs. There was a new set of hallways, much more creepy now that we were underground. There was a bulletin board on the wall with a bunch of old photos and news articles on it. Me and Andrew were checking that out when a metallic thud came from down the hall. We shined our lights over in that direction, just in time to see what we were sure was a forehead moving from the hallway into one of the rooms. Andrew started screaming as we ran back in the direction we came. Now, I would have just thought it was a homeless person or something, but as we were stomping up the stairs, a single flight below us, we could hear steps following us. At this point, I was screaming too. The feeling of being in the back was horrifying. I felt that at any moment, I would be grabbed from behind and dragged down the stairs. But we made it back to the main hall, and down to the window that we entered from. We made it outside, and could hear through the window the door to the stairway opening from down the hall. We got to Andrew's car as fast as we could, and drove off, never looking back. We were a young couple that had just moved into a new house. We had a bedroom on the first floor. The house had an upstairs, a middle floor, and a den, no basement. At night, we started hearing strange noises coming from below us. I checked under the bed, nothing was there. The sound seemed to be coming from beneath the floor, but the house didn't have a basement, so it didn't make sense. We started to notice things were different in the morning, like certain doors were opened that we were sure had been shut the previous night. My wife's closet door always seemed to be open. We made sure to shut all the windows one night just to make sure it wasn't some kind of draft. The doors were all open the next morning. We had decided that it had gone far enough. The next night, we both stayed up, listening and waiting. The noises coming from below were louder than ever. Sounds like things being pushed around, moaning. I headed down to the den and put my ear against the wall, listening for where the sound may be coming from. It was coming from inside the wall I was up against, but a little lower down, below the den. I went back to my wife. I told her we had to stay up for as long as possible and see what happens. We stayed up until around 2. My wife started to drift off, and I guess I had shortly after. I woke to my wife shaking me, silently crying to herself. She pointed at her closet, which had been opened. There was some kind of hidden door propped open in her closet. It led down into the floor. I hopped out of bed and shined a light down there. It was a ladder, leading far down to some hidden room. I had my wife lock the door and call the police while I took my machete with me down into the secret room. When I got to the bottom, I found a light switch. The room had a table and chair, a small cot in the corner, and a bunch of toys scattered across the room. A scream came from upstairs. It was my wife. Somebody was trying to break down the door. I climbed up the ladder the best I could while holding the machete. By the time I got up there, they had already kicked in part of the door. They stuck their head through a hole in the door and looked at me. He was a dirty-looking man. I saw craze in his red eyes. He must have seen my machete because he ran straight out the front door. I don't know what the room is for, maybe some kind of old bomb shelter or something. But I don't know who the hell that man was, how the hell he got down there, and how long he's been down there. I was 27 years old, moving out to live with my girlfriend in an apartment. It wasn't the fanciest place ever, as we weren't the wealthiest couple ever, but it was fine for us. The first night in, we already hated the neighbor. There was yelling and thumping going on all night. It was like they didn't sleep all night. My girlfriend wanted me to go over. I told her if it continued the next night, I would go over. We didn't hear anything of them throughout the day while setting up furniture, but when night came and we were trying to get some sleep, the freakish yelling and banging resumed, sometimes even bangs on the wall. I decided to draw the line and confront them. I knocked on the door, and a middle-aged albino woman answered the door. Her voice was raspy as if she had been smoking cigarettes for the past 40 years. I politely asked her to quiet down. She told me to back off and mind my own business before slamming the door in my face. The noises and yelling only got louder after this. My wife said we should report them. I went to the front desk the following day, bringing up the couple that lives in that apartment. The doorman looked puzzled. He told me that only a woman named Kathy lived there. Her husband passed away 5 years ago. She was written down as only being one person in that room, so she was breaking a rule of the apartment building. The doorman went to go check out the room. The woman let him search the apartment. He came back to tell me that she was all alone in there, which seemed so odd. He did, however, ask her to keep it down. I thanked him and went back to the room. It seemed it had worked, as there weren't any sounds that night. I woke to see somebody standing by our bed. "Anna?" I whispered. My wife turned next to me. She was in the bed. The familiar raspy voice at the end of the bed said we shouldn't have reported her. I screamed and fumbled for the light switch. My wife started screaming even louder. By the time I turned on the lamp, she was gone. I slipped on my shoes and ran out into the halls in my robe looking for her. Her apartment door was open, but she wasn't in there. Where could she have gone so fast? Nothing was heard of Kathy for a whole week, before one night, there were 4 loud knocks on our walls. Not thumps like the previous noises. These were actual knocks, meant to get our attention. We moved out a day later.
This has been heavily requested for a while now. A compilation of some of the stories I've read through the years that genuinely freaked me out the first time I read them. I was out doing a delivery one late night. It was probably the longest drive I've ever taken for a pizza delivery from the pizza place I used to work at. It was a 20-minute drive, which isn't too crazy out where I live. Plus they ordered 4 large pies, so I figured it was a party and I'd get a much bigger tip. Navigating the dirt roads at night was always annoying though. I pulled up to the given address. It was some old, sketchy-looking building literally in the middle of a forest clearing. There were no cars parked anywhere, or any lights on. I put my car in park, and I called my boss. I asked him to reread the address at least 3 times to make sure I typed in the right place. I could tell he was in a really bad mood, and he told me to at least knock on the door and check it out. He would normally get mad if we took back 1 pie, but I was afraid of what he would do if I brought back 4. I was insanely unnerved, but I got out anyway and forced myself to the front door of the building. There was no doorbell, so I just knocked really hard. I heard nothing, and didn't really expect to hear anything. I was extremely disappointed, not because nobody answered the door, but because I was realizing that it was all a waste of time and gas. I knocked 1 more time out of desperation, then began to hear some kind of rustling noises from inside the building. I knocked again, and yelled that I was the pizza guy. There was silence now. I felt a bit more uncomfortable now than before, but before I could turn around, I noticed something at the window. There was someone looking through the window. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. All I noticed were their eyes. Their eyes were open wider than I knew possible, staring intently at me. I was disturbed enough by this to drop the pizzas and run back to my car. The shitty thing wouldn't start until turning the key for the third time. I drove off the grass and back onto the dirt road, but I felt the car rocking about, shaking and bumping. Something wasn't right. I didn't make it far from the building before I started hearing a sharp scraping sound coming from outside. There was so much resistance that I couldn't even drive. The car came to a stop. I got out of the car to check what the hell was wrong. A chill ran up my spine as I began to feel like my heart was constantly skipping beats. My tires had been slashed and had completely fallen off the rim. Not just the front though. All 4 tires were slashed. I realized somebody did this when I was knocking on the door to that building. Instead of running, I got back in the car and locked the doors. I was so close to that building I could practically see it from where I was if it weren't for the trees blocking the view. I called 911 and told everything to the operator. She told me the cops would be over as soon as possible and that I need to stay hidden. I asked her if it's advisable to stay in the car or run, and she told me it would be best to stay in the car with the door locked. She asked me to stay on the line with her until the cops would arrive. My whole body was shaking. In all directions there was nothing but dark, seemingly endless forest. I knew it would take forever for the cops to get there. I was not comfortable with sitting in that car so close to whoever did this. The next part is what utterly destroyed me. It still shakes me to this day, and I hope nobody ever has to experience this kind of fear. As I was scanning all the windows, making sure nobody was outside, I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was the same person I saw at that window, eyes opened wider than ever. I could see now that it was a woman, and I could ever so slightly see a smile begin to spread across her face. I opened my door and full-on sprinted into the woods, not caring how much noise I made. I ran until I was out of breath, which didn't take long, and I hid behind a giant log on the ground. I tried to cover my loud breathing with my hand as I waited and waited for what felt like hours until I finally heard sirens in the distance. I gathered up all the stamina I had left to run all the way back in the direction of the dirt road. Eventually the glowing red and blue lights came into view, and I had never felt better in my life. They were parked in front of my car, investigating with flashlights. I came out yelling at them like a lunatic to help me. I fell to the floor and started to gag, almost throwing up from running so much. They picked me up and began to ask me questions, to which I explained everything to the best of my ability. One of the 2 cars drove over to the building, and the 2 officers began to search the building. They came back with nothing except for a couple of spiky objects. These objects were exactly the same as the ones used to slash my tires. The cops guessed that it was some kind of sick, demented couple, being that I saw the woman, but unfortunately, as far as I know, they were never found, and that still kills me inside to this day. I obviously quit my job right after that and started working at a local grocery store. I know that I'll never forget seeing that woman at the back of my car. It's a little-known common courtesy out in the mountains during a snowstorm that if someone's seeking shelter in your cabin, you let them in. No, I wasn't the one offering that courtesy to someone else in the story. I was the one seeking refuge. It was supposed to be a long weekend of hunting, but what started as a cold, sunny day quickly formed tons of dark storm clouds, and I quickly found myself right in the middle of a blizzard. After a full, rather unsuccessful day of hunting hares, I was way too far and disoriented to make my way back to my cabin. I had to seek refuge somewhere else. I came across a log cabin nestled between a circle of trees. No lights on, but I still had to try the door. I hit the door with my fist a few times. No answer, but I could hear footsteps on the other side, approaching the door. I expected it to open, but it didn't. I shouted that I'm lost and need shelter. The door cracked open, and I heard a voice say, "Come in, leave your boots by the door." I waited a bit, expecting him to open the door fully and formally greet me as anyone would, but that didn't happen, so I pushed the door open myself and entered the dark cabin. The room was lit by 2 candles, just enough for me to see the couch that the man then told me to sleep on. As for the man, all I saw was his silhouette on the far side of the room. The little light from the candles didn't extend that far. I dropped my bag and gun on the floor and laid down on the couch. I thanked the man for letting me crash here till the storm blows over. He didn't answer. His behavior wasn't the most bizarre thing. Folks are strange up in the mountains. If he wasn't up for conversation, I'd just get some early shut-eye. I closed my eyes, though the level of darkness with my eyes closed wasn't much of a difference. I was subconsciously waiting to hear the man's footsteps leave the room, but they never did. I opened my eyes, and his silhouette was still in the corner of the room, just standing there. I felt the need to say, "Yeah, I think I'm just gonna get some sleep now, thanks." No response. I turned to my other side so that I wouldn't be tempted to just keep opening my eyes to check on him. Some time passed, but without having heard his footsteps walk away, the curiosity was eating away at me. I turned over to look again, and this time, I swear to God, the silhouette of the man was closer by at least a few feet. I couldn't make out his face, but the slight glow from the candles would just barely trickle around the man's forehead, and what I saw was disgustingly pale skin. I quickly gathered my belongings and thanked him, but I said I had to go. I didn't look at him anymore, because I don't think I wanted to know what he looked like. I put my boots on outside and hurried back into the blizzard. I came across another cabin down the hill, this one with the lights on. I knocked on the door, and some old man and his wife answered the door. They welcomed me in immediately and were very inviting. They gave me some hot tea and offered me a spot on the couch. I told them my story about the freaky cabin up the hill, and the two looked at each other, puzzled. The woman confirmed 2 times the cabin I was talking about. Then she said, "Honey, the owner of that cabin was murdered 2 years ago. That cabin has been vacant ever since." I'm 27 years old. I live alone in a rural town in Virginia, about 2 blocks away from my parents. My parents are both in their 60s, and my mom has become a very worrisome woman in her old age. Sometimes she walks over uninvited and lets herself in, since I had regrettably given her a key, which can get a bit annoying. Like if I would be out really late on weekends at a bar or with women, I would sometimes come home to my mom sitting in the living room waiting, worried sick. I know you may just think, "Oh my god, that's crazy, why not just put your foot down and tell her to stop?" Well, because you don't know my mom. It's very hard to describe her, but she's the kind of worrisome, innocent little lady that you just can't bring yourself to go against. And I hate to mention, she also has mild dementia. Anyway, this was Saturday night. I think it was around 2 in the morning. I was at a nearby club with a group of college friends, really the only place to hang out in this boring town, and I was getting ready to head home. I said goodbye to all my friends and walked the 3 blocks it took to get back to my house. I walked up my front stoop in my drunken haze and dug my hand in my pocket for my keys. When I grabbed the doorknob, I realized it was unlocked. My mom was here again. I quietly opened and shut the front door, locking it behind me. I put my keys on the kitchen counter and found a note written in my mom's handwriting saying, "You forgot this at our house, next to the box of half-eaten cake my parents didn't want." I didn't see my mom anywhere, so I assumed she must have gone upstairs to sleep in the guest bed until I got back, which is something she would commonly do as well. Then I heard footsteps upstairs, confirming it, and that's when I sighed once again. 27 years old, almost 3 in the morning, and she still has to wait up and treat me like a child. I ran upstairs to check the guest bed, empty, along with all the bathrooms. I was afraid Mom was having one of her episodes due to her condition, so I ran to the phone to call my dad. After 4 rings, my dad picked up in a groggy voice, asking what the hell is the matter. After I told him that I heard Mom wandering around upstairs in my house, there was a short pause, and then he said, "That's not possible, she's sleeping right next to me." My mouth fell open as I turned my head to face the dark upstairs, and just barely by the light provided by the kitchen, I could see a head peering around from the corner at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. I screamed into the phone as I ran out the front door and down the street to my parents' house, explaining to my father on the way. About halfway there, my dad told me, "Alright, I'm gonna call the cops," and hung up. I made it to my parents' house, where my mom was already waiting at the door, worried sick. My mom explained that she did come over to clean my kitchen a little bit and to bring over the cake they didn't want. 2 police cars pulled up in front of my parents' house, where they escorted me and my dad down the street to my house. 1 officer stayed outside with us, while 2 others went inside to investigate. It felt like 15 minutes before they came back outside and said it was clear. They checked the crawl space, the attic, everything. There was really nothing for me to report, other than the door was left unlocked and I saw the outline of a head upstairs before I ran for it. Still, I didn't feel safe sleeping in there that night, so I went back to my parents' house. Me and my dad are certain that my mom simply forgot to lock the door when she left, as her memory has been getting worse over the past few months. My dad has been stopping her from coming over alone from now on, which makes me both sad but also relieved. Some nights I still get paranoid that whoever was in my house that night never left, and is still hiding in here somewhere. This is one of the few unexplainable events I've experienced in my life. I was home upstairs in my room, writing my paper for my history class. As far as I knew, I was home alone, but apparently I was mistaken, because my mom's voice called out from downstairs, yelling my name. I called back, "What?" She didn't answer, so, slightly annoyed because I didn't want to be interrupted from my train of thought on my paper, I reluctantly got up to go downstairs and see what she wanted. When I got downstairs, I looked around for my mom, but she wasn't anywhere in sight, so I yelled out, "Mom?" and she yelled back my name in response. Her voice came from down in the basement, so I went to the basement door, but strangely the lights were off. I called down the stairs, "Mom?" again, and she called back. I yelled out, "What are you doing down there with the lights off?" She didn't respond. I flicked on the light and went down the stairs. I heard my mom call my name again as I was near to the bottom of the steps. It was getting weird. Each time she called my name, it sounded exactly the same, like there was zero difference in inflection every single time she said my name. I yelled out, "Mom," again, and she once again yelled back my name. She was nowhere to be seen in the basement, but then I noticed the little crawl space closet door was open. I call it that because it's a weird closet that you have to kind of crawl into, but it takes up a large chunk of the basement. That was the only place left in the basement that my mom could be. So I said, "Mom," one final time. No answer this time. I went closer to the closet door and got on my knees just to try and look in. It was pitch black inside, and I was starting to get freaked out. I said, "Mom, are you messing with me?" There was no response at all, just the quiet buzzing sound from the basement light. I got back up, and for some reason decided to sprint back upstairs, slamming and locking the basement door behind me. I didn't know what I had just witnessed and heard, but I went to grab the house phone and call my mom's cell number. It rang a few times until my mom picked up, and I learned that she was out grocery shopping. I told her, but she didn't believe my story, of course. She thought I was messing with her. It took half an hour of begging her to believe me that she finally went along with it, and when she and my dad were both home, we all went down to the basement together. The closet door was still open. My dad went inside, but there was no one in there. This still remains to be the most haunting, unexplainable experience of my life. There was this one time I was out late drinking with friends. It was some point in the summer of 2016. We were kind of just walking around town and then around the neighborhood when one of my friends spotted someone hiding in a bush. He pointed and said, "Look," and we all walked a little closer to get a better look. We could see what he was talking about, but just barely. It was bizarre, like someone hiding in this bush in front of this house. When we got too close, apparently, this weird, off-putting sound started coming from the bush. So we all screamed and laughed and ran away. We screamed because it was scary, but laughed because at the same time it was bizarrely funny. And there were a lot of us, so... Anyway, we walked back to our houses respectively, assuming whoever was in that bush was just messing with people. I fell asleep pretty easily that night since I was drunk, but next thing I remember was waking up to the near pitch blackness of my room. I couldn't look at the clock to see what time it was because I literally couldn't move. I was in a sleep paralysis state. I looked around the room with my eyes only and started to hear a familiar noise, the noise we heard coming from that bush. Then I looked straight in front of me, at the foot of my bed, and what I saw was pure nightmare fuel. It was what appeared to be this floating, grotesque, horrific head of a demonic ghost-like thing. As it got closer to me, I realized it wasn't floating. There was a body, but its body blended in with the blackness of the room. Its mouth hung open, and it just kept making the familiar noise from the bush. It got mere inches from my face before it suddenly just faded away, and I was able to let out a scream and move my body. I sat in my bed, panting and heart racing. I flicked on the lamp and checked around my bed, but that demonic thing was gone. What I just experienced seemed so real, like I was awake for it. It wasn't a dream. I told my parents about it the next day, and they agreed with me that it was sleep paralysis, though they had never heard of anyone seeing freaky shit like that before. A 15-year-old girl named Sabrina was home alone one night when there was a knock at her front door. Her parents weren't supposed to be back until the following Monday, and she wasn't expecting any guests. She went to the front door to ask who was there, and an unfamiliar male voice said back, "Sabrina, there's been an accident. Your father's in the hospital." At first, Sabrina was about to open the door, but stopped herself and asked first, "Who is this?" The voice on the other side said, "It's a friend of your father." Sabrina asked what her father's name was, and the man responded correctly. Still showing caution, Sabrina went to call her father as the man at the door repeatedly knocked. When Sabrina's father picked up, sounding completely fine, that's when she knew. Sabrina's father was perfectly fine. There was no accident. The knocks had stopped, and Sabrina's father called the police, but the unknown man was gone. Whoever it was someone who had some kind of intel on the family, from their names down to the fact that Sabrina was alone. The family never found out who the man was. This video is going to be a little different from my others, in that I'm going to focus on one story instead of three. Now to begin, everyone knows what a crawl space is, whether you have one or you don't. An unoccupied narrow space within a home between the ground and the first floor, usually in place of a basement and used for storage. Usually the scariest things you'd find in a crawl space would be rodents or giant spider crickets jumping at you. But Jake Binger found something much more disturbing than any creepy creatures in his crawl space. In a nice area of Firestone, Colorado, Jake owns his own house where his girlfriend lives with him. Jake had met his girlfriend, who remains nameless, at a comedy club in town, and the two hit it off and would eventually start to date. At some point during this time, she opened up to him about her old abusive ex. She described her ex as a ticking time bomb, how he could at times be very sweet, and that she loved his more gentle side, but that he could switch to a completely different person just like a flick of a switch. And in this alternate personality of his, he was a very aggressive, scary man who would do things like fight bouncers at bars or punch holes in walls when angry, or even sometimes getting physical with her, and he got angry rather easily. Things would become so rocky between the two that eventually she would end things with her ex, but he didn't take that news well. She feared that her ex was stalking her parents' house at late hours of the night because either she or her parents would hear sounds from the backyard, like the gate slamming shut or the backyard shed door closing. Her ex disabled all forms of social media after the breakup, and she became so concerned for her well-being that she decided to move in with her current boyfriend, Jake. Now you may be wondering, what does this have to do with anything? Well, on one regular night that Jake's girlfriend wasn't in the house with him, he was in his living room when he heard noises from in the crawl space. He moved from his living room to his kitchen and sat at the island for a while, continuing to listen and hearing strange occasional thumping sounds from directly below him. It was at this time that he started to record a video for his Snapchat story, assuming what he was hearing was an animal of some kind, such as a raccoon. As he enters his crawl space, he stops recording for a second so that he could take another video with the flash on so that he could navigate the crawl space. The crawl space appears to be mostly empty aside from some boxes that were tucked into one corner. Jake says when he saw these boxes this way, he was confused because he didn't remember leaving them that way. As Jake walks deeper into the crawl space where the left side expands further down, Jake says he heard a noise in one corner, like pebbles being scraped on the concrete floor. As he heard the noise, he turned to the corner where he saw the terrifying sight of a hunched over man dressed in all black, who was hiding in the corner behind a wall, now getting up and approaching Jake. Jake's scream sounded like a legitimate scream from somebody witnessing something as disturbing as an intruder hiding in their crawl space and then basically lunging at them. The video cuts out seconds later, as being that it was a Snapchat video. Once he let go of the record button, the video stopped. At this point, Jake explained that he ran back to the ladder of the crawl space, and as he climbed up, the man grabbed his foot and tried to pull him down. But Jake managed to kick his way out of the grip and slam the crawl space door in his face. Unfortunately, the door to the closet, which contained the crawl space door, didn't have a lock, so Jake's first instinct was to run to the kitchen and grab the biggest knife, then lock himself inside the bathroom. He heard the closet door open and then footsteps come over to the bathroom door, and then the man on the other side of the door try the doorknob. Not knowing what kind of weapons the person might have had, Jake didn't engage the intruder in a fight. Instead, he silently called 911 and kept the line going, and eventually, he heard footsteps quickly leave the house out the front door. Now Jake told the 911 operator about the break-in, and so police came to the house, conducted a quick investigation, and a police report was created for the incident. Jake's girlfriend refused to come to the house after hearing of the incident because she swore left and right that the man had to be her ex. It's impossible to make out any notable facial features on the man in the video. Jake says he saw that the man was wearing a black mask and his head was covered by a hood, which you can kind of see in the video. Jake also described the man to have a very tall-looking, intimidating stature despite his hunched-over posture in the crawl space. Jake's girlfriend's ex was a very tall man, and upon watching the video, she swears it looks just like his body. Of course, this is just speculation on her part, and without solid evidence, legally they don't have much of a leg to stand on as far as pressing charges. In the video though, loud thumping and hammering type sounds could be heard in the beginning. And after investigating, Jake found that the intruder had ripped through some of the insulation of the crawl space and had been hammering at some of the wood in the ceiling of the crawl space, and also some of the pipes. It's unknown why he was doing this. It was also discovered that the key that the couple hides in one of their sheds outside was missing, which already revealed how the intruder got inside, and might insinuate that the man who broke in had his eyes on the house for a while. Jake changed the locks on the door that same day, but his girlfriend has yet to return to that house, worried that it's now being stalked by her crazy ex-boyfriend. Jake has installed a Ring doorbell camera recently, and on several occasions, he's gotten a notification from his Alexa device that there's someone at his front door, but there's never anybody actually there. Not visibly, at least. While there isn't any solid evidence as to who the intruder was, it may be a strong possibility that it is in fact her ex-boyfriend. What started as a guy simply trying to get a funny Snapchat story of what he assumed to be a raccoon in his crawl space turned into something much more horrifying. The start of a nightmare, even. Jake said he would keep me updated on the matter, so if any new information comes up, I'd consider making a follow-up if you guys would be interested. In this footage submitted by Jason, something happens that if it weren't caught on dashcam, you wouldn't believe it. It was around 1 in the morning. Jason was on his way to what he thought was going to be the house of a woman he matched with on a dating app. The person had given Jason their address over the app. They had not exchanged numbers. After putting the address into his phone, he realized that not only was the address 20 minutes away, it was also in a less desirable side of town. Against his better judgment, he got in his car anyway to head to the given address, which was in a cul-de-sac. After entering the cul-de-sac, he realized all 3 houses had all of their lights out, and when he tried to message the girl he matched on the dating app, she would no longer answer. After waiting a few minutes for an answer, he realized the person had unmatched him, meaning it may have been a trick or prank, and so he turned the car around. As he was leaving the cul-de-sac, he noticed someone on the sidewalk stepping out into the street, and so he locks his doors and slows down. This is the footage captured on the dashcam. The footage is kind of grainy, so it's hard to make out some of the smaller details. But basically what happened was Jason slowed down as he saw a masked person walking into the middle of the street, immediately knowing something was off because there was nothing across the street except a busy highway. So he locks his door and comes to a stop as the person is directly in front of his car. Then the masked person reaches into his pocket, grabs a handgun that's a little hard to see in the video due to lighting, and starts running towards his driver's side door. Jason immediately steps on the gas and drives past the man, who then tries to open the door, which thankfully was locked mere seconds earlier. It's hard to see unless you pause and zoom in, but the man in the video was wearing a creepy smiling mask. The man didn't fire any rounds, but that's also under the assumption that the gun was even loaded or real. It's not that uncommon to hear about people using fake guns in scenarios like this. What was strange about this was while even though it was in a less desirable end of town, it was still a very residential block right next to a highway, so it was a slightly questionable place to pull this. However, it doesn't take a detective to put the pieces together that this was a setup through the dating app to lure some unsuspecting guy to a dead-end road in order to rob him at gunpoint or worse. According to Jason, the spot in which the man stepped into the street was out of view of any houses as it ran alongside a long fence and bushes. Jason reported the whole incident to the police, including the given address. Jason was accompanied with a police officer to knock on the door of the address in question the next day, and an older woman who claimed to live alone answered the door. She claimed she had nothing to do with it, and that's obviously pretty likely to be the truth, meaning a random person simply chose that address because the street was low-key and hidden, debatably a perfect spot to try and set somebody up. Luckily, Jason didn't decide to stay put and got away without harm, because who knows what could have happened. Before the next clip, I just want to talk about today's sponsor, Aura. I read a lot of horror stories on this channel, but a growing horror story in America that more and more people are falling victim to is identity theft, with there being a new victim every 14 seconds.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim.
You may be unpleasantly surprised to learn how easy it is for your information like passwords to be leaked in a data breach, and with this information, hackers and scammers can gain access to a whole lot more of your information. Luckily, Aura provides identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, a VPN, antivirus software, and more all combined into one app, serving as an ideal one-stop shop. I personally have been the victim of data breaches, and because of this, a lot of my accounts have been hacked. The feeling of trying to log into my accounts only to see the passwords had been changed actually made me sick to my stomach. Some of you may even remember my Twitter account was publicly hacked like 6 years ago, and being a YouTuber that keeps most of my info on the more private side, I definitely find myself being a target of these things quite often, and Aura has been a huge help in keeping my information secure, constantly alerting me anytime my passwords are compromised. Right now, if you click the link in the description or go to aura.com/MrNightmare, you'll get a 2-week free trial, no commitment necessary. Aura also offers a 60-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied. If you care about your security, I do personally recommend the app. On November 23rd, 2016, the day before Thanksgiving, a fire began on the Chimney Tops Trail in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The fire was sparked by a group of kids playing with matches in the woods, and it was fueled by unusually high winds. Flames erupted in a remote area with steep terrain that made access to the fire difficult for firefighters. Crews spent 3 days working to create a containment area lower down the mountain. Helicopters flew overhead doing bucket drops to attempt to slow the spread of the fire. On the 4th day, winds picked up and the fire spread, but the Gatlinburg fire chief said projections showed no immediate threat to Gatlinburg. Despite the predictions, on Monday, November 28th, dry weather and extreme winds caused the fire to grow rapidly. That evening, wind gusts of up to 87 miles per hour sent embers flying into Gatlinburg, wreaking havoc on the city and surrounding communities. Town officials reported that evacuation alerts were sent out to residents' cell phones, but many residents said they never received any alerts. 14 people were killed and 191 people were injured in the fire. The flames destroyed nearly 2,500 homes and left an estimated $2 billion worth of damages. Resident Michael Luciano recorded his and his stepbrother's horrifying escape down the mountain. During the drive down, just about every single passing cabin is seen engulfed in flames.
Oh, shit. God. Thanks, Lord. We'll get out of it. Hit the gas.
I can't see.
You can see. Why is every cabin on fire? Fuck. I don't know about this. Dude, just started at Natty Branch. We're going the wrong way.
What?
Oh God, that was a beautiful cabin too. Not now.
And at multiple points, the two men find themselves stuck behind fallen trees.
Fuck, go through it. Go through it.
I can't.
We cannot be stuck. Try it on the left side where these sticks are short. Get a running start.
Even at one point getting stuck behind another driver, which happened to be an old man who rolled his window down to tell Michael that he couldn't see.
Does this motherfucker want to die here? What the f*** is wrong with you? Go! Get the fuck out of here!
The old man ended up pulling to the side and following Michael's taillights down the mountain. At certain points, it seems very likely the men aren't going to make it out alive. But by some stroke of luck, they made it to the containment area with only minor damages to their truck. Their luck didn't just end there though. Their cabin survived the fires with very little damage, despite its close proximity to the surrounding engulfing flames. While this footage can almost make you feel like you're in the truck with them, it obviously can't compare to the actual fear of being in the suffocating heat inside the truck mixed with tension of the life or death situation at hand. In this footage, a young girl who wished to remain nameless, so I'll refer to her as Amanda, was driving home from her boyfriend's house. She had just pulled out of the driveway and started heading down her boyfriend's block when a car in the middle of the road came into view. The car wasn't moving but didn't have its hazards on, so Amanda waited for a few moments until the driver in front of her lowered his window and waved for her to go around him, so she did. Upon passing the car, she quickly realized the car behind her started moving as well, which at first wasn't too weird, but it became clear very soon that the car was following her after it started making the same turns she made. She started to make as many random turns as possible, and sure enough the car behind her stayed on her tail. She then calls her boyfriend, which I muted at her request for privacy, and she explained to him that somebody was following her. He reassured her to keep calm and everything would be fine, and to just drive to the nearest police station. So she looked up the nearest police precinct, and when they were only a few blocks away from it, the car behind her turned the opposite way, likely because they knew she was going to the police station. Still on the phone with her boyfriend, she told him the car behind her turned a different direction, so her boyfriend assured her she should be fine to go straight home. Just be cautious. Amanda drove home after this, which was in the same town, so it was unlikely to be a long trip home. She even checked to make sure the coast was clear before parking her car and going inside. But later in the night, she woke up to this.
What the fuck is that?
Amanda heard sounds right outside her bedroom window, like someone was trying to lift it open from the outside. Once she turned the lamp on, the noise stopped. She called for her dad when she realized what was happening, and the occurrence was immediately associated with the vehicle that was following her earlier. So the family called the police to file a police report and showed them the dashcam footage of the vehicle following her. The vehicle could be identified as a BMW, and Amanda was asked if she knew anyone who owned a BMW that might want to hurt her. The only person she could think of was a guy named Christopher Crea, somebody who she blocked on social media for obsessive harassment, who happened to drive a black BMW. These were the last texts Christopher had sent to Amanda before she blocked him. Christopher happened to know Amanda's boyfriend personally through mutual friends, and through those connections, he knew where he lived, so the idea that this Christopher guy waited outside Amanda's boyfriend's house suddenly became a possibility. As an idle threat, Amanda's boyfriend sent an Instagram DM to Christopher that she was filing for a restraining order if he bothered her again, but his response was him acting confused and claiming he hadn't bothered her. Whether it was acting or not is a mystery, but nothing happens again at Amanda's house after that, so it doesn't seem too far-fetched that it could have been this Christopher guy. The following dashcam footage was taken in the vehicle of Uber driver Christina Spikuza, and I want to warn you, while there is no actual graphic footage shown, the story behind it is upsetting. 38-year-old mother of four Christina Spikuza was doing some night drives on February 10th, 2022, when 22-year-old Calvin Crew used his girlfriend's phone to order an Uber. Christina accepted the ride and picked Calvin up. He gets into the car in a sketchy mask covering his entire face except for his glowing eyes. She greets him by asking for Tanea and how are you today, but he doesn't answer either question, or if he did, it was likely an inaudible grunt.
Hi, for Tanea. How are you today?
Christina was extremely polite to Calvin, even asking how his day was going a few minutes in.
Did you have a good day today?
Calvin is seen turning to check if the coast was clear, and then lifting his mask up slightly before pulling a gun on Christina and threatening her.
I'm sorry?
Keep driving.
You've got to be joking.
Keep driving.
What are you doing?
This is a gun. Keep driving.
No, it's not. Stop. Come on, man. I got a family. What are you
I got
doing?
a family too. Now drive.
What are you doing?
Drive.
Please stop.
Drive the car, miss.
Why
Just
are you
drive.
doing
Don't
this?
Don't make this so noticeable. Just drive.
Why are you doing this?
Drive the car.
To where?
Complete the trip.
I cannot do that.
Complete the trip.
Why are you doing this?
Complete the trip.
Please?
He tells her to cancel the ride so that it could no longer be tracked. Not long after, he grabs her phone to gain access to her banking apps to transfer money to his girlfriend's
Get
phone.
off of me. Please. No.
Keep driving.
Before grabbing the dash cam and throwing it out the window, he tells her that everything will be okay if she does what he says.
Do what I say and everything will be alright.
But that later proved to be a lie. Christina's body was discovered by an Amazon driver 2 days later, lying in the woods 50 feet off the road, with a single gunshot wound to the head. Detectives found Christina's dashboard camera along the route of her last Uber ride, and the footage provided all the evidence necessary to prosecute Calvin for her murder. Prosecutors are currently seeking the death penalty for Calvin. Friday the 13th has long been considered a date cursed with bad luck. It's largely been a date that people look at as an excuse to do scary-themed activities like binging scary movies. But this is the first year since 2017 that Friday the 13th falls in October. So for this video, we're looking at some of the most terrifying events that have actually taken place on the notorious day of bad luck. Tupac Shakur, better known as a stage name simply as Tupac, was an American rapper widely considered to be one of the most influential and successful rappers of all time. Tupac was arguably responsible for some of the most memorable rap verses in history. And while much of his notoriety came about after his shocking death in the mid-1990s, he's still remembered and talked about today. On the night of September 7th, 1996, Tupac was in Las Vegas celebrating his business partner's birthday. And one night while there, he attended the Bruce Seldon vs. Mike Tyson boxing match with Suge Knight at the MGM Grand. Later that night at about 11:15 p.m., while at a stoplight, a white four-door Cadillac sedan pulled up to the passenger side of Tupac's vehicle, and an occupant rapidly fired into the car. He was hit 4 times, once in the arm, once in the thigh, and twice in the chest, with one bullet entering his right lung. Tupac succumbed to his injuries 6 days later on September 13th. which was a Friday. The case went unresolved, with people suspecting his friend Suge Knight and even rapper Biggie Smalls of the murder. But recently, on September 29th, 2023, 60-year-old Dwayne Keith Davis was charged in the killing of Tupac. Dwayne is not accused of being the one to pull the trigger that night in Las Vegas, but he is, however, being accused of having been the one to call the hit on Tupac. The trial is still currently in progress. A lot of people refuse to fly on Friday the 13th, and while that may come down to pure superstition among some people, there have been a few tragedies in the air on this day. In October 1972, on Friday the 13th, a plane heading to Chile was forced to crash land in the Andes Mountains. The flight was carrying 45 passengers and crew, including 19 members of the Old Christians Club rugby union team, along with their families, supporters, and friends. 3 crew members and 9 passengers died immediately. Several more died soon afterward due to the frigid temperatures and the severity of their injuries. Survivors of the crash hid in the wreckage for warmth and were eventually forced to cannibalize and eat deceased passengers to survive. A rescue team was sent out, but the mission was called off after 10 days. However, 72 days after the crash, as the weather improved with the arrival of late spring, 2 survivors climbed a 4,700-meter mountain peak without gear and hiked for 10 days into Chile to seek help, traveling a total of 38 miles. The 2 men were able to alert authorities that there were still 16 survivors trapped in the mountains, leading to their rescue. But believe it or not, on the exact same Friday the 13th as this plane crash, the same exact date, was another plane crash that killed all 164 passengers and 10 flight crew. It was Aeroflot 217. The plane needed to land due to horrible weather conditions, but crashed upon landing in Russia just 3 miles away from the runway. The exact cause of the crash could not be determined, but it's speculated that it was largely to do with simply human error. Casualty-wise, it is one of the worst plane crashes in history. While these incidents are incredibly rare, perhaps there is a reason flights are cheaper on Friday the 13th. If you're not superstitious, perhaps it may be worth it. But now we move from the sky to the sea, looking at the Costa Concordia disaster. On Friday the 13th, January 2012, the 8-year-old Costa Cruises ship Costa Concordia just left Civitavecchia, Italy at approximately 7:18 p.m. On board were 1,022 crew members and 3,206 passengers. As the Concordia approached Giglio Island several hours later, it deviated from its standard course, moving closer to the small Tuscan island for a maritime salute, which included the cruise ship sounding its horn to show off to onlookers on the land. The Concordia had performed several in the past, but the area was known for rock outcroppings, and at some point, such a formation was noticed in the ship's path. Francesco Schettino, the captain, ordered a change in course, but allegedly due to language issues, the Indonesian helmsman steered the boat in the opposite direction. It took a little over 10 seconds to correct the maneuver, and the boat's bow ultimately swung clear, but the stern collided with the reef at approximately 9:45 p.m. The damage had been done. The Concordia's port side had suffered a 174-foot tear. This caused the ship to list and then partially sink, landing unevenly on an underwater ledge. Although a 6-hour rescue effort brought most of the passengers ashore, 33 people died, 27 passengers, 5 crew, and later a member of the salvage team. An investigation focused on the shortcomings in the procedures followed by the Concordia's crew and the actions of the captain, Francesco, who left the ship prematurely, leaving behind about 300 passengers on board the sinking ship, most of whom were rescued by helicopters or motorboats in the area. Schettino was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Despite receiving criticism, Costa Cruises and its parent company Carnival Corporation didn't face criminal charges. The total cost of the disaster, including victims' compensation, refloating, towing, and scrapping costs, is estimated at $2 billion, more than 3 times the ship's original $612 million construction cost. The cruise line offered compensation to passengers to pay for all damages, including the value of the cruise. Only 1/3 of the survivors took the offer. This remains the biggest modern cruise ship catastrophe. David Anthony McGreevy was born in Southport, England in 1951 to Bella and Thomas McGreevy. David was the second oldest of 6 children. Since David's father was a sergeant in the British Army, a lot of his childhood was spent moving from one army base to another. This could mean that one year he was being educated in an army school in England, the next in Germany. According to David's mother, living in Germany was his happiest time. David's mother Bella later said she could only remember one childhood incident of concern, as David was otherwise allegedly well behaved. In 1967, 15-year-old David left school and enlisted in the Royal Navy. However, he was dismissed from the Navy in August 1971 after being court-martialed for starting a fire that destroyed a mess wardroom. David then moved back in with his parents, but around this time his life was crumbling as his fiancée broke up with him and he was fired from several jobs. For this reason, his parents became fed up with him and kicked him out. So David turned to his friend Clive Kenneth Ralph, who let him board with he and his wife, Dorothy Elsie, and their 2 small children, Paul and Dawn. Clive and Dorothy had been school friends, and there was a 5-year age gap between them. They had married in September 1968, when Dorothy was 16 and pregnant with Paul. At the time David moved in, Dorothy was pregnant with their 3rd child, Samantha, who was born on the 14th of July in 1972. With both Clive and Dorothy busy working, David acted as a babysitter for the Ralph children. He was regarded by family and neighbors as well as the Ralphs as a person who loved children. So what would soon happen was nothing short of unexpected and horrific. On Friday the 13th, in April 1973, Elsie was picked up from work by Clive, who had left home late with the children all asleep. When the couple arrived at their home, the police were already there, and they escorted them to the police station, where they were told of the horrible truth that their children had been murdered. So what happened? Well, David was known to be a heavy drinker and sometimes a violent drunk. He had gone to a nearby pub earlier that evening with a friend, and he had 7 pints of beer. The 2 men had played cards and darts, though a small altercation took place prior to leaving the pub. Clive picked David up from the pub and brought him to look after the children, while Clive went to get Elsie from work. Sometime between 10:15 and 11:15 p.m., David, while completely wasted, became infuriated with the children, beginning with the baby Samantha, who had been crying for her bottle. David violently killed the 3 children, each in a different yet brutal manner. After killing the 3 children, David went down to the basement and retrieved a pickaxe to further mutilate their bodies. David was arrested by police at 3:50 a.m., walking on a road near the Ralphs' home. Upon his arrest, David initially denied any responsibility, but several hours later, he admitted to the murders, with his only explained reasoning disgustingly being simply that the baby was crying. David was sentenced to multiple life sentences with minimums of 20 years, and in prison he was subjected to frequent abuse by other prisoners, and he spent most of his 45 years behind bars in protected conditions. In December of 2018, a parole board cleared David for release, declaring that he had changed significantly and he was no longer a risk. There's bound to be anywhere from 1 to 3 Friday the 13ths each year. If you are superstitious and choose to be more low-key on this inevitable date in an attempt to escape any bad luck, you may end up like Daz Baxter. On Friday the 13th in 1976, Daz decided to just stay in the bed for the day to avoid anything bad happening, only to be killed when the floor of his apartment block collapsed under him. There's countless other stories and examples of misfortune and downright tragedy that's happened on Friday the 13th, but this could be said for literally every other date on the calendar. At the end of the day, maybe it's just another day. March 4th, 2022, these were the texts 21-year-old college student Gavin received after getting home from a night out with friends. Hey, is this Gavin? Yes, who's this? It's Alex. Where you at? Send your location. I'm at home. What happened to you? What number is this? I'm using my friend's phone. We're stranded at the bar. Can you call us an Uber to your house? What? Why don't you just do it? Dude, my app isn't working. Just figure it out. I don't even know what that means. Just send your address. Gavin was out with his friends Alex and Omar, and they were last with each other at a bar in Dallas called Parliament. The trio was getting ready to wrap up the night, but Alex stayed behind when he saw other friends at the bar. So Gavin and Omar went home, and about an hour passed with no contact between the three. That was when Gavin received the text from the random number, and as you see, they claimed to be Alex using his friend's phone. Alex had lost his phone, and he was using his friend's phone, who Gavin apparently had never met before. He was asking Gavin to call him an Uber, since according to him, it wasn't working on his phone. Gavin refuses, basically noting how silly that sounds, and tells him to call his own. The conversation picks up here, where Alex agrees to apparently call his own Uber and asks for Gavin's address. Gavin stated that this was around the time he was becoming slightly suspicious, but he still gave his address, however not without making a comment about how he should memorize his address by now. He says he cut him some slack due to the fact that he was drinking. Gavin asked him why he was using his friend's cell phone, to which he got a response that Alex lost his phone. He then lets them know that they're on their way, and when Gavin asks Alex if he knew his friend, he responds, "Nah, he's cool though." 10 minutes later, the number sends a text that truly starts to make the conversation suspicious. "Can we just come in through the front door when we get there?" As if asking Gavin to leave the door unlocked. It was at this moment that he started to question everything about the interaction, from the first text being, "Hey, is this Gavin?" to the asking Gavin to call them an Uber, to now the leaving the door unlocked. He tried to call the number, but it rang and went to voicemail. He then tried to text and call Alex's number repeatedly, but it would just keep going to voicemail, and the text would just say delivered. Gavin stopped answering this foreign number now, and called his friend Omar to ask him if he'd heard anything from Alex, to which Omar said he had not. After reading Omar all of the texts, Omar agreed something was off. They looked to call the bar Parliament, but there was no number listed online to call. Around this time, the number texted Gavin again, saying, "We're here, open the door." Gavin went to his door and looked through the peephole of the door. There was no one in immediate view though, which maybe at first would have implied it was all a prank. But when there was a knock at the door, Gavin checked the peephole again. There was still no one on the other side. Reality of the situation was setting in now for Gavin, as this was no longer just texts on a screen. Someone was actually on the other side of his door. So he asks, "Who is this?" Straight to the point. They reply with simply, "LOL." Gavin asks again, "Who is this?" And they reply, "Open the door." So instead of answering again, Gavin calls the police. The knocking persists for a few minutes, in long intervals. Then it stops for good when the person or people on the other end realize Gavin was onto them. Gavin went on to DM one of Alex's friends who he was hanging out with after he and Omar left. And almost instantly, the friend DM'd him back explaining that he, Alex, and their other friend were jumped by a big group of men in the street. They were all badly injured and went to the hospital. Alex's phone had been stolen, while one of his friend's wallets and phone was stolen. Alex not having a password on his phone meant all of his info and conversations were accessible. Alex's friend helped him in getting his phone locked. The police report that Gavin would get from the police who came to his house would later help Alex in getting his service provider to replace his stolen phone for him. The lack of a password on the phone meant the thieves were able to gain information such as Alex and Gavin's conversation, where they would deduce that Gavin was home alone and an easy target. So if Gavin didn't catch on to the suspicious situation, he may have been opening his door to 2 or more people ready to attack him too and rob his house. The phone number that was being used to text Gavin turned out to be another stolen phone, therefore didn't help in finding the thief. The case regarding finding the thieves and assaulters remains open. These texts were received by an anonymous viewer from his dad's ex-girlfriend, who will be named Kathy for the purpose of this recounting. The viewer will be called Rob. The reason Rob's dad ended things with Kathy was because of her increasingly erratic and delusional tendencies. Her mental health was declining for unknown reasons. Rob's dad was dating Kathy for about half a year, and Rob's grandparents both passed away during that time. Rob's dad wasn't very open at first about how Kathy would start acting all paranoid about his son's dead grandparents, about how she believed they placed a curse on her. Rob's dad cut ties with Kathy when the delusions got too ridiculous. Rob was left in the dark for the longest time about Kathy's delusions though, presumably out of embarrassment for having spent so much time with a supposed nutjob. It wasn't long after his father's breakup with Kathy that Rob would receive texts from her himself. When her attempts at reaching his father no longer worked, she clearly went to him instead. Kathy texted Rob, "Hello, sweetie, I need your help." Rob replied with, "What? What's up?" "Your father's parents put a curse on me. I need you to tell me the cemetery and plot number they were buried at." "What do you mean they put a curse on you?" "I keep hearing their voices and having bad premonitions. I know it sounds crazy, but I need it to stop." Of course, being told by somebody that they were hearing your dead grandparents' voices would be a clear indication that the person is completely unhinged. So Rob went to show his dad the texts. His dad laughed and told him to just ignore her. Rob says that instead of blocking her though, he just let her continue to text him to see how crazy her text would get. She followed up later that night with, "I need to exhume their grave. If you help me out, I will sleep with you. I know you've always checked me out whenever I was in your dad's house." Rob still didn't answer, and the next day, her text got a little more graphic. Rob showed these texts to his dad, and this time his dad was not amused. He called Kathy and screamed that he would be getting a restraining order if she didn't stop. When he hung up, she kept trying to call until he ended up blocking her number. That same night, while Rob's dad was asleep, Rob was still in his den watching a show when he heard the doorknob jiggling. He went to look through the glass atop the door and saw Kathy fiddling with a knife in the key slot of the doorknob. She looked up at him and through the glass and started pleading with him to let her in. Rob called for his dad, and she started to scream no. When his dad came to the door, he screamed at her and then went to call the cops. Kathy would scream back constant obscenities and threats, waving her knife in the air. She didn't leave, and police arrived to her still at the door with knife in hand. Based on her coming to their house with a weapon and not leaving when asked, she was arrested, and Rob's dad filed for a restraining order against her. Clearly, Kathy was more than just delusional and was starting to suffer from some sort of mental illness, such as paranoid disorder. This does not mean she wasn't a danger to others though, as well as herself, evident by the knife she brought to their house and attempting to break into their house. Luckily, no one was hurt. An 18-year-old girl named Leanna, living in Hoboken, New Jersey, was at a local bar with her friend on a Saturday. That's when she got a notification that someone was trying to send her a message on Instagram. Usually people disregard these message requests, as they're messages from people you don't follow back on Instagram. In a girl's shoes, those message requests are 9 times out of 10 men sending them flirtatious and often creepy messages. A lot of people don't ever check these messages, but sometimes when you get that notification that someone sent you a message request, curiosity gets the better of you. In this case, Leanna opened the DM, and it was from some random account with no profile picture and no followers, asking her if she was at McSwiggin's, a local bar in Hoboken. Right away this is cause for alarm, of course, because this would be coming from someone who knew where she was at that exact moment, someone intentionally using a fake Instagram account. Leanna follows with, "Yes, who is this? You look good in that pink top. Aren't you 18 though? Shouldn't be in a bar. I won't tell anyone though. Who is this? Just a guy who thinks you're really attractive." By this point, Leanna assumes it's a prank by someone she knows, and asks who's messing with her. The person replies it's neither of the names she just mentioned. Upon Leanna asking for a selfie, the person replies, "Can't." The girls look around the bar for anybody that could be alone, mainly an older, predatory-looking man. They saw a few men that appeared to be alone sitting at the bar. None of them were eyeing the girls, though. That's when she says, "Okay, bye, we're leaving." Moderately uncomfortable, the two girls leave the crowded bar and start walking. They go to another bar nearby, which is far less crowded than the first. They sit at the bar and order a few drinks, looking for young guys to talk to. When Leanna's phone vibrates again, and she gets another creepy message from the person. It said, "This is my favorite bar, good choice." Leanna shows her friend the message, and then the two start looking around the bar for someone who could be sending the messages. And as if he was looking to be found out, Leanna saw a man sitting on the bar stool closest to the door, looking at her with a blank, wide-eyed expression. She says the best way she could describe his appearance was the killer from the movie The Lovely Bones, mainly because of his glasses, hair, and mustache. They made extended eye contact, to the point that it seemed the man was outwardly trying to be creepy, making it obvious who he was. The girls asked the bartender for help. They showed him the DM she was getting and then pointed at the man, who in response to being pointed at, started looking around the room, in any direction but towards the girls. The bartender went over and told the guy in a loud, commanding voice to leave the bar without question, threatening to kick his ass if he didn't leave the girls alone. The man left the establishment, surely feeling at least some sense of embarrassment, as anyone would. Leanna and her friends stayed at the bar for about half an hour, only to avoid running into the man outside. But Leanna says their mood to stay out was gone after that creepy encounter, and they just wanted to know who that was, or how he knew Leanna and where she was at that moment. When the girls left, they began walking home. They were on 2nd Street, a quiet one-way road, especially at the hour they were walking. They were being mindful of their surroundings, making sure they weren't being followed. But even when you think you're aware of your surroundings, the unexpected can always happen. Leanna and her friend heard running footsteps from behind them out of the blue, and there was no time to react before the man grabs Leanna with one arm around her face and mouth and the other around her waist. He picked her up as she tried to scream and fight, and of course her friend did the screaming for her, and continued to hit at the man. The commotion caught the attention of people from around the corner, and a few people came to the scene. The man released his grip from the girl and walked away quickly. Nobody went after the man. The girls called the police there on the spot. Leanna showed the police the DMs, and 2 witnesses backed up their story as well. A police report was made and a case was opened to find the man in question. Leanna would speak to detectives at her home a few days later, who gathered all the information she could give. They would later use the surveillance footage from the 2 bars, but the police have not yet been able to match the man seen in the footage to anybody. As a precaution, she still has her Instagram disabled to this day. If someone is dedicated enough, they can find someone through their Instagram by keeping track of what places they go to in their pictures, what school they go to, and who they associate with. That's why it often is a good idea to keep your Instagram private. This story follows Ivan, a man who lives in the neighborhood of the Arts in a small western New York City. Over the past 10 years, he's moved around a decent amount, from his hometown where he currently resides, to Orlando, Florida, to another city in western New York, and then finally back to his hometown. He had lived in a couple different apartments since moving back to his hometown, none of them anything special, until he finally found what seemed to be the perfect apartment in the attic of an old mansion that was converted into apartments. It was downtown in the neighborhood of the Arts, an ideal place to live for young, artistic, creative individuals. Ivan moved in with one of his childhood best friends since it was a 3-bedroom and he would need roommates in order to maintain the rent for the place. The first year living there was uneventful, which was ideal for Ivan. As far as neighbors, there were 2 men who were likely a couple that always got into fights so loud that everyone in the building could hear, and on one occasion, one of them locked the other out of their apartment naked, and given that the mansion was across the street from a school, the cops were called. But as long as they didn't involve Ivan or his roommates, they would try to stay out of any of the drama. After about a year of living there, a young couple, a guy and a girl in their late 20s to early 30s, moved into apartment 2, and they seemed friendly at first, and always said hi when passing in the hall or anytime Ivan would be hanging out on the front porch. They were pretty decent neighbors for the first year to year and a half that they lived there. One day, Ivan came home from work and noticed that someone had put some furniture on the front porch. Ivan immediately assumed it was the couple in apartment 2 since they had an entrance to their apartment right on the porch. As he was getting ready to head into the building, the guy living in apartment 2 came out and introduced himself as John and told Ivan that he wanted to build a community within the apartment building. Ivan, being a people person and caring about his community, was initially all for this idea. For the next few days, Ivan would come down after he got home from work and hang out on the porch since it was springtime and he wanted to enjoy the nice weather. He would sit on the couch on the porch and either read a book or work on his computer, and for the time being, it seemed nice that the community porch was set up. A few days after he met John, Ivan found him and another one of his neighbors talking on the porch about something that happened. Someone had stolen another neighbor's motorcycle from the driveway. Everybody ended up having a small tenant meeting where they waited for the cops to show up and tried to make the one neighbor whose motorcycle had been stolen feel better. When the cops showed up, Ivan went up to his apartment and let the police do their jobs. The next day, when Ivan got out of work, he walked into his apartment and his roommate asked him about John, mentioning that he left gifts for every apartment. Everyone got something different. Ivan and his roommate's gift was a shoebox filled with comics, books, toys, and chocolates. The roommates agreed the gifts seemed odd, but at the time, Ivan's odd gesture could still just be seen as friendly. But then, Ivan's roommate told him something that started to make him uncomfortable about John. His name wasn't John, it was Sean. Ivan considered the fact that maybe he misheard his name since they can sound similar, until he remembered that the guy even spelled out his name for Ivan as John when they first talked. Later on that same night, Ivan's other roommate, who had moved in at the end of the previous year, came home after seeing his daughters and told Ivan that Sean was outside asking for him. He told him that when he was walking up to the building, Sean had come out from the shadows of the side of the building, wearing only a pair of shorts. He asked Ivan's roommate to have him come down and help him get something out of his trunk. After everything that was stacking up, Ivan knew there was no way he was going down there to help him. Something felt wrong to him, rightfully so. Ivan woke up the next morning to go to work, and on his way out of the building, he stopped on his porch, and in the middle of his front yard was what Ivan described as a hobo garden. Sean had set up a bunch of garbage around a half-empty refrigerator that had the door ripped off. There was broken glass everywhere, and there was a patch of dirt dug up in front of it, as you can see in this picture taken by Ivan. Not only was this an extreme eyesore, but this would also be freakishly weird of somebody to do. Ivan immediately called his landlord and told him that he was not okay with that and that Sean was starting to weird everyone out. They told him they would address it, and so Ivan left it at that and went to work. When he got home from work, some of the garbage had been moved to the side of the road, but no one was around. Ivan decided that it would be better to just go up to his apartment and not get involved anymore, since he was starting to feel like something wasn't right. Ivan was only in his apartment for about 5 minutes at most before he started hearing yelling coming from outside the bedroom window, not directed towards him, just loud yelling coming from outside. When he looked outside his window, he saw Sean throwing the garbage from the yard into the street. He was freaking out, apparently yelling to himself. Then another one of Ivan's neighbors, Mark, ran up to him and tried to calm him down. One of Ivan's roommates returns home at this time, and he decided to try to help calm him down as well. After a few minutes, things went silent other than the sounds of cars driving down the street. Ivan's roommate then came inside and started telling him about Sean's freakout outside. Sean had been yelling that he doesn't think he did anything wrong. By this point, it was clear that Sean was an unhinged individual, and so Ivan told his roommate to try not to interact with him if possible. Things seemed to be getting worse and worse. It was only a few hours later that Ivan started to hear more yelling and even started feeling the building walls shake a little bit. Someone was arguing with someone, and things were clearly getting physical, evident by all the noise and shaking. Ivan contemplated calling the police, but decided to text his neighbor Mark first since he lived on the same floor as Sean. Mark didn't text back right away, not until after things seemed to calm down. Mark told Ivan that Sean got into a huge fight with his girlfriend, and Mark once again had tried to calm him down, and in response, Sean tried to fight Mark. Mark called the cops on him, and Sean ended up being taken to the station by the police. Things didn't end there though. In fact, things only got worse. That Friday night, Ivan stayed at his girlfriend's apartment after the couple had a date night. When he woke up that morning at her place, Ivan had a slew of messages and missed phone calls. When he opened up the first message from his roommate, the first thing he saw was a picture of fire trucks outside of their apartment building. Apparently Sean had burnt down his apartment. Ivan's roommate said that only Sean's apartment was burnt up, but Ivan still rushed home after hearing that so he could figure out what exactly was going on. When he got there, Mark and Ivan's roommate were standing on the porch. Sean claimed that something went wrong with his stove and that was it. But when the firefighters checked the building, they found that the vents around the outside of the house looked like they had been stuffed with towels and clothes, as if he were trying to keep the fumes from escaping. The cops were called, and Sean was taken away once again. But still, that wasn't the end of it. Sean officially got evicted that week, and that following Monday, Mark had gotten word that Sean had been released from holding. All the tenants were a little nervous to hear that. That Tuesday night, someone had showed up to the building and busted a bunch of the windows around the apartment, and very clearly tried gaining access to apartment 2. That someone was obviously Sean. There were also drawings, swastikas, and writings left on the back door, saying pig, land is free, kill, and Roy. Mark had enough and filed for a restraining order against Sean. Unfortunately, that only aggravated Sean more. Over the night on Wednesday, Sean would make another attack. Ivan woke up once again to a slew of texts. Mark and Ivan's roommate had apparently tried to wake Ivan up overnight, but he was in too deep of a sleep to hear them. Ivan opened up Mark's text since he saw he sent him the most messages, and there were a bunch of pictures attached. The pictures were all of Mark's car, burnt to the ground, completely destroyed. Sean was erratic and dangerous, and now all the tenants were living in fear of what he would do next. The next night, all the tenants in the building had a meeting on the front porch. Mark filled everybody in on all the information that he gathered on Sean. Apparently, Mark had been in contact with Sean's mother, who was trying to smooth things over by being transparent with Mark. He found out that Sean was planning on skipping town. Mark also managed to get footage of Sean walking over to Mark's car overnight and then walking away. There was a case here, but that didn't make anyone feel better about anything. As all the neighbors talked, everyone shared everything that they could. The woman in apartment 3 told everyone that one night, she walked by her window only to see Sean out there, standing on the side of the building, using a bag of water that he filled with holes and just staring at her while doing so. The woman in apartment 4 had been receiving stalker-esque notes and poems in her mail. Everybody in the building was being terrorized by this guy. The last bit of information given to Mark by Sean's mom was quite disturbing. Sean's mom said that he had been following Ivan, his roommates, Mark, and the woman in apartment 4. Not only that, but Sean had followed Ivan to his girlfriend's house and watched them through her windows. Ivan knew the man was dangerous and was now stalking him and potentially his girlfriend. For the next week, if Ivan wasn't standing guard on his front porch, he was checking in on his girlfriend's house. Thankfully, a few days later, the tenants finally got news that Sean had been arrested. Shortly after that, Mark and half of the other tenants moved out of that building since they had had enough. Ivan and his roommates have stayed living in the building to this day and haven't had any issues since, but hopefully for their sakes, Sean won't be getting out of jail anytime soon.
I was doing some night hog hunting in the woods near my backyard. I was hiding in the tower I had built about a decade ago. In case anyone's wondering, I of course had a night vision scope attachment. I guess I'm what you would consider a hardcore hunter. I don't want to bore you with the unnecessary story prolonging details, so I'll make this short. And I want everyone to know that though I agree this story sounds far-fetched and crazy, it is nothing but the truth. And I in a way actually consider myself lucky that I'll always have such a horrifying story to share. So, while I was sitting in the tower waiting for movement, it finally came. I took aim and found the source. But it wasn't at all a hog, or any kind of animal I was expecting. It was a person, a man wearing all black. Black sweatpants, black shoes, and a black hoodie with the hood over his head. But that wasn't the freakiest part. He was dragging a sack behind him. My heart started racing. I was pretty sure I was witnessing this guy trying to bury a body. I continued to watch him, but then he slowed down, and I swear to God, it looked as if he turned his head up to me. I ducked down under the wooden walls of the tower, shaking in my boots. Yes, I had a gun, but just the idea of using it against a person is horrifying. I lay low, praying to God that he hadn't seen me. It wouldn't make sense if he could, though. It's practically pitch black out here, or at least that was my logic. Seconds felt like an eternity as I waited for the footsteps in the leaves to move elsewhere, but I didn't hear any footsteps. All I heard was the sound of a foot hitting one of the wooden planks on the ladder of the tower. I felt the entire tower vibrate and shake as there were 2 more steps moving up the ladder. At this point, I was asking myself deep down, am I going to be able to shoot someone? But for some reason, whoever was down there decided not to climb all the way up, as I heard them jump back down to the forest ground and began dragging the sack away. I think I stayed frozen like a statue for at least 10 minutes before even peeking over the ledge again. The coast seemed clear. I had to get home and warn the police immediately. I hopped over the ledge and descended down the ladder. I turned on my pocket flashlight, which in hindsight was a stupid move considering the situation, and ran back in the direction of my house. I was only able to run for about 10 seconds or so when I heard the rapid, manic footsteps crunching the leaves from behind me. I took a look over my shoulder, and there he was, inches away from my face. I spun around and shot him in the shoulder. He stopped and screamed in agony, and I took that moment to finish my dash to my house. Again, in hindsight, I should have held him hostage somehow, but that doesn't even matter now. I called the police, who showed up within 15 minutes with a whole search squad, and I led them all into the woods to the exact location where I shot him. There was a faint yet noticeable blood trail spilled onto the leaves, which led past the body bag, which the cops seized, and eventually right to the maniac, who was hiding under a log next to a tree. He was arrested and tried for the murder of Jin-Kwen Sakanaki, a Japanese corner store owner. I don't know the full story behind it, but I do know I won't forget this one for the rest of my life, and I'll also be telling it for the rest of my life.